the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 351: The Blocked Path to Promotion. In a separate office at the Academy of Magical Sciences, Harvey sat with three high-ranking necromancers, discussing their research. While necromancy was a discipline with limited theoretical knowledge and slow development, it had also produced some exceptional talents. In Harvey's opinion, the three necromancers before him were considered the true representatives of this current school of magic. Counselor Prahl, though a descendant of a branch of the Lambert family, was slightly older than the other two Lamberts. He had successfully ascended to higher rank 20 years earlier through the specialized rituals of the necromancer cult, successfully completing his current position. Patriarch Arturo was even more gifted in the ways of necromancy. In his early 40s, he inherited the magical legacy of the previous cult speaker, becoming the youngest high speaker of both the Lambert family and the cult of the necromancer in its over 100 years of existence. Had he not forcibly experimented with the lich transmutation ritual, attempting to reach legendary status through unconventional means, his future potential would have been limitless. Harvey was most surprised by Elder Sirius, the most ordinary-looking of the three. Though he wasn't even 60, his years of obsession with necromancy had eroded him, leaving him with a profoundly aged appearance. His hair was thinning and pale, his skin dry and wrinkled, and his face and hands were covered in striking age marks. He looked even more aged than the Union's chief, Lord Sarath, who was over 150 years old. But his eyes were peculiar. Far from the characteristic azure blue of the Lambert family, they were a deep, dark gray, as if carrying the infinite wisdom accumulated through countless passages of time. In the family's ancestral land, Elder Sirius was responsible for guarding the corpse cave and safeguarding the legendary cult artifacts. Therefore, his body was most severely eroded by the temple's projection. His eyes were replaced through the secret art of flesh and blood, and are not the original pair that were blinded by the trauma, Arturo explained, noticing Harvey's frequent curious glances at Sirius. Harvey inquired curiously, "Is that the legendary artifact you used in the lich ritual cave in the Undersea, the one that could manifest projections of the necromancer temple?" Arturo nodded and said frankly, "Yes, but this legendary artifact, called the Afterglow of the Dead, wasn't originally used to create protective arrays or seal projections. It's actually a rare amplification artifact." An amplification, legendary artifact? It sounded rather useless. Over the years, Harvey had seen and heard of the fame and effectiveness of many legendary artifacts on the spellcaster forums, such as Chief Salus's Storm Furnace and Chief Gallagher's Eye of Form. Harvey had personally witnessed a former and even had the pleasure of borrowing the latter. In his opinion, legendary artifacts were either powerful, capable of both offensive and defensive purposes, or, like the Eye of Form and his own Dragon Chaser's Crown, possessed incomparably strange and unique auxiliary effects. If they simply provided amplification, they could hardly be called legendary. But the Afterglow of the Dead clearly possesses a terrifying protective effect. If we hadn't employed some special means, black, white, and I would have been trapped within it, drained of all our vitality." Sirius smiled wryly. "That's one of its greatest drawbacks. While the projection automatically covers the entire area upon activation, while simultaneously defending against enemies, the wielder is also continuously drained of vitality. It's fair to say that besides magic power, the body's flesh, blood, mental energy, and life essence will slowly dissipate. Besides magic power, this legendary magical weapon doesn't crave magic power. Instead, it relies on the wielder's own flesh, blood, and mental energy to power it. How bizarre. But why do you call it an amplification device?" Harvey continued, increasingly confused. With Sirius's vitality drained and his magical power waning, the responsibility of keeping and safeguarding the artifact naturally fell to Counselor Prahl. After obtaining Arturo's permission with a glance, he retrieved the exquisitely designed model of the bone castle from his storage ring and held it out to Harvey. "This is because, ever since the passing of the first speaker of the esoteric cult, for the past century, undead spellcasters in the Southern Territory who wish to ascend to higher ranks, have relied on its power for assistance. There's no other way, what? Harvey's eyes widened in disbelief. But thinking back in his time at the Academy of the Dead, he'd never heard of a necromancer from a legitimate academy successfully ascending to higher ranks and publicly revealing their identities. Even the Academy's dean was a part-time shadow caster, not a true necromancer specializing in necromancy. It's really sad to think about it. Most of the apprentices who chose this spellcasting faction voluntarily or were forced to do so probably never thought that their only path in magic had been blocked at the very beginning, and their future was almost in sight. Most necromancers with extraordinary talents, after failing to advance to higher ranks on their own, discovered that no matter how hard they tried, they were completely unable to engrave and condense the magic circles belonging to high-level spellcasters within their magic patterns. Naturally, some people gradually discovered the key to the problem. This is definitely not the natural law of magic. Otherwise, how did those high-level necromancers in ancient times who could even turn powerful magical beasts into corpse puppets successfully advance to the top of legends? Harvey muttered to himself. So, the path of advancement for the undead spellcasting faction has been blocked artificially. Patriarch Arturo sighed softly and shook his head. We have no idea what the exact reason is. Perhaps it's the natural decline of the death magic in the magic network space. In short, everyone knows that this spellcasting path is inevitably dying out. Elder Sirius, who has been engaged in experimental research for many years, felt the same way. If it weren't for Lord Harvey's proposal to open up a new direction for faction development, we would probably continue to take risks and try the Lich transformation ritual. If the speaker fails, it will be my turn. If I fail too, it will be Prawl's turn. If anyone fortunate enough to reach the legendary rank and establish a deep connection with the magical web's alternate dimension could uncover the truth behind this inexplicably severed path, giving hope to those who succeed them. Ascending to higher ranks with the aid of legendary artifacts isn't the worst option. There's no need to be so dejected. Harvey reassured. He knew that other orthodox spellcasting factions also had numerous rituals and secrets to aid advancement, greatly aiding spellcasters in their rank advancement. Mr. Son of Flame had once mentioned to Harvey how he had emulated Chief Gallagher, mimicking Master Sereth's unique 9-ring technique and forcing his way to higher rank in battle using secret potions. The Afterglow of the Dead, which helped necromancers condense their magic circles during their ascension, was a powerful amplification artifact. Sirius and Prawl exchanged a glance, each offering a wry smile. I'm afraid Sir Harvey has misunderstood. Although the three of us appear to have advanced to higher ranks, in reality, no high-level spellcasting aura has coalesced within our magic patterns. Arturo took over, adding calmly, indeed, the function of the Afterglow of the Dead is to simulate a new aura within the magic patterns, bypassing the existing constraints and allowing us to successfully cultivate original or improved necromancy. However, a simulated aura is always inferior to one truly born within the magic patterns. Therefore, in terms of true rank and strength, the three of them are no match for casters of other orthodox factions who have advanced through the normal analysis of their original spells. This is completely a bug, a forced cheat. Chapter 352, Signs Above the Starry Sky. Considering that the Afterglow of the Dead is currently recognized as the only way for undead spellcasters to ascend to higher ranks, Harvey was initially hesitant about how to borrow it for research. However, Arturo and the other two spoke first, offering to hand over the artifact to Harvey for safekeeping, perhaps yielding new discoveries. After all, this artifact has been passed down through generations of necromancers, yet no one has truly grasped its origins or true purpose. Each successive leader's constant attempts and experiments have only led to the gradual weakening of their own vitality, a costly endeavor. This is especially true after Arturo's transformation into an alchemical being, completely losing the ability to activate and control the Afterglow of the Dead. With only Pro remaining as a high-ranking member in good condition, the necromancers simply cannot afford the toll of constantly operating this artifact. With his previous experience as a warning, Harvey naturally wouldn't attempt to activate the artifact himself. Compared to the three high-ranking members of the esoteric cult, his greatest reliance on studying this strange artifact lay in the two soul puppets he harbored within his spirit anchor. Using the puppets to control the artifact would only result in a loss of some of his flesh and blood essence. He could always use the magic net to trap and ensnare alien spellcasters, engulf them within the spirit anchor, and transform them into puppet eggs. Consumables weren't worth worrying about. As for the constant drain of mental energy from the artifact while activated, there was even less concern. Even the pseudo-high-ranking members of Arturo, Prawl, and Sirius could withstand it, so his own mental strength, surpassing that of a legendary rank, was certainly no problem. Late at night, in the underground laboratory of the Lord's castle, Reiner and Asdalen worked in perfect harmony, handling the instruments and equipment needed for Harvey's experiments, occasionally huddling together to exchange quiet words. Harvey lay calmly on a recliner, eyes closed, as if in a state of deep meditation. The strange legendary artifact, the Afterglow of the Dead, surprisingly didn't rely on the infusion or guidance of magical power to activate its use, but instead directly absorbed the vitality of the user's flesh and blood. This intrigued Harvey. Another purpose for attempting to analyze this artifact through experiment stemmed from a hypothesis Mr. Hartdemon had casually mentioned: the artifact's true form must exist within a hidden spatial rift within the magical network. It was most likely created by an ancient undead legend to conceal the coordinates of his mage tower in the real world and protect the magical heritage and knowledge. This principle is similar to that of a mirage. A visible projection must have a corresponding true form. Perhaps the Afterglow of the Dead is the key to unlocking that undead legacy. However, the analysis must be carried out with extreme caution. Harvey wasn't worried about safety issues caused by improper operation, but rather about a single mistake that could destroy this incredibly fragile bone model. This was the only tool currently available to help necromancers advance to higher levels. With no real progress in soul-casting research, the necromancers at the academy were counting on it. If it were accidentally damaged, it would be as hopeless for the necromancer cult and the Lambert family as amputating a limb below the neck. No matter what anomalies arise during the experiment, do not infuse the artifact with magic power without authorization. It's best not to allow the energy transmission equipment in the energy gathering array to interfere at all times. The soul puppet sitting beside Harvey opened its eyes, stood up, and instructed its two assistants. The two alchemical creations, long accustomed to Harvey's uncanny behavior of randomly switching between models during experiments, nodded in understanding. Then, as Dallin glanced at the alchemical beasts guarding the wall and, using their soul connection, gave them the highest order to surround Harvey's body and maintain vigilance and protection. Although the underground laboratory was completely sealed, and the castle's bloodline warriors on night watch were stationed overhead, it was always a good idea to have a few extra layers of insurance. With everything ready, Harvey, manipulating the soul puppet, sat at the lab table. His pale, slender hands carefully lifted the bone-carved metal of the temple, tentatively concentrating a small amount of mental energy and slowly making contact with it. According to Patriarch Arturo, to control the sphere of influence of the Necromancer Temple's projection in the Afterglow of the Dead, one simply needed to infuse mental energy while carefully observing the three exquisitely and lifelike nether banshees carved atop the bone temple model. As his mental energy continued to flow, one of the three previously frozen banshees suddenly seemed to come to life. The pure white banshee, barely the size of a fingernail, slowly twisted its head toward Harvey, then let out a silent wail, flapping its wings and beginning to fly around the temple's spire. What an exquisite and interesting little thing, Reiner couldn't help but whisper in admiration. Activating a single nether banshee would confine the temple's projection to the underground laboratory, preventing it from affecting anyone above or in the castle. Aside from the puppets and Harvey himself, who remained completely unaffected, the alchemical beings in the laboratory didn't care about having their flesh and blood drained of their vitality. They simply didn't have such things in the first place. With a continued infusion of spiritual power, the entire underground laboratory seemed to have been suddenly washed away by time, its vibrant colors rapidly fading. A silent hue of black, white, and gray enveloped everything around it, and Harvey's ears gradually grew silent and still. He instinctively glanced back and saw that the brass and silver-white metal bodies of Asdalen and Reiner were now covered in a layer of rust. The bright soul fire in their eye sockets suddenly faded to pale white. Activating just one banshee wasn't enough to directly manifest the temple's projection into the real world, and the underground laboratory couldn't possibly accommodate such a magnificent palace. Almost there. This level of stable mental energy infusion is enough to keep the artifact activated while also controlling the projection's impact within the laboratory, Harvey muttered softly. He manipulated the soul puppet to maintain its mental energy output, and was about to inform the two assistants standing by behind him that they could begin testing the artifact's properties with various instruments. But before he could turn again, the bone castle in his hands suddenly trembled slightly. The three banshees atop the temple tower awakened, But instead of spreading their wings and circling the temple, they darted headfirst into the bone temple like frightened insects, hiding themselves away, never to reappear. What's going on? Harvey didn't have time to examine it before he suddenly felt the puppet, still tightly linked to its original body, suddenly, guided by the bone sculpture, uncontrollably increasing its mental energy infusion. Boom! Harvey instantly lost contact with the puppet and unknowingly entered a deep meditative state. The projection of his original body suddenly appeared within the spiritual anchor. It was still the familiar azure planet, still the dark expanse of space. Something's wrong. Something seems off. Harvey, controlling the projection, suddenly turned and looked up. That tiny patch of starry sky, which had suddenly appeared in space thanks to his original creation of the magnetic field, seemed to have been ripped open by some invisible hand, revealing even more glittering stars. However, the expanded sky still looked as if it had been temporarily cut and spliced together, jarringly out of place against the darkness of the universe. Why does the bone temple artifact and its projection trigger a reaction in this patch of sky within my spiritual anchor? Without complete certainty of the consequences, Harvey didn't dare take any risks. The trajectory of the star projection was sometimes linked to his own destiny. This must be a sign of something he couldn't yet clearly identify. Chapter 353 Unknown Star Region. Rumble. Crack. A series of muffled booms of thunder rang out, shattering the stillness of the cold winter night. A sudden flash of lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the entire night sky above the pioneers. Countless people awoke from their slumbers, flocking to their windows to gaze up, wondering why thunder and lightning could suddenly strike in the middle of winter. Astrologer Melissa also emerged from her shallow meditation. Her face pale, she slowly walked to the window, frowning as she gazed silently at the now calm, deep night sky. This wasn't a good sign for an astrologer. There was a sudden bang on the bedroom door, and Melissa knew who it was without a second thought. It's unlocked. Jinn, wearing a thin coat over her pajamas, Eye of Illusion unlocked the door barefoot and entered. The sky is unusual, and I was worried it might affect your meditation, so I came to check. Astrologers of the arcane school of spellcasting practiced a far more peculiar method than ordinary arcane spellcasters. Besides cultivating spells within their own magic patterns to ascend in rank, they also sought out a star in the real world that represented their destiny. Using the connection between the star's projection and their own, they could decipher hidden and precious magical knowledge, sometimes even enabling a degree of prophecy. This was the main reason why astrologers were often employed as royal magical advisors to the southern kingdoms. Compared to elementalists and arcane mages, these prophets, who could truly bring good fortune and avoid danger, were clearly more sought after by the nobility. Melissa sighed softly and whispered, "I'm not affected at all, but the celestial phenomena are certainly unusual. And since our teacher hasn't returned from Grizzly Castle yet, I think we should head to the Lord's Castle immediately." As the few high-ranking combatants in the territory, Melissa and Jinn couldn't quite get along with Chris and the others the way Benoit had, instantly immersing themselves in the alchemical experiments they were interested in. They also didn't possess the vast knowledge of their teacher, Duncan, who could engage in lively conversation with Lord Harvey and his vampire alchemist, Mr. Azdarin, sharing in-depth discussions on arcane magical knowledge and experimental results. Therefore, on weekdays when they weren't receiving missions from the Lord, they opted to stay in the guest house closest to the castle, unlike the newly arrived necromancers who were active at the Academy of Magical Sciences. Jinn quickly walked to the window, reached out and pushed it open, shivering at the biting cold wind. "What are we waiting for? Let's use our flying magic to get there right away." Melissa grabbed his arm and said speechlessly, "Can't you just change your clothes before leaving?" Harvey smiled bitterly, took the warm towel Reiner handed him, wiped his face, and explained gently, "It's true that there were some minor problems in the laboratory. I didn't expect it to cause strange celestial changes in the surrounding area." The Eye of Illusion secretly glanced over at the two alchemical life forms standing beside Harvey and found that their once shiny and new enchanted metal armor was suddenly covered with many mottled traces of rust, as if it had been corroded by a long time. Looking at the state of the two assistants, "I'm afraid there are more than just a few minor problems." Jinn couldn't help but mutter under his breath, and was immediately glared at by Melissa. The astrologer bowed gracefully to Harvey. "Since nothing unexpected has happened here, Your Excellency, we will not disturb your meditation and rest." Just as the two were about to bow and leave, Harvey suddenly raised his hand to stop them. "Wait. Oh, Madam Astrologer is an astrology spellcaster. I have an experiment I'm trying to solve and I need your assistance." The Eye of Illusion paused, then chuckled. "Sir Harvey, have you forgotten we're both battle mages?" Neither of them excelled in magical experimentation or theoretical research. Harvey waved with a smile, pulling a smooth, slightly yellowed sheet of paper from the desk. He rolled it up slightly and handed it to the astrologer. "I know you astrologers have extensively collected and studied the coordinates and orbits of the stars." Harvey gestured at the diagram in his hand. "So, I'd like you to identify the coordinates on this star map, and the corresponding observation area." The astrologer instinctively took the diagram and slowly unfolded it, revealing a remarkably crude star map on the pure white paper. All the stars were represented by ink dots, and the larger ones were inexplicably connected by thin lines. It was obvious that this wasn't the work of a person well versed in astrology. This map is rather crude," the astrologer frowned, examining it several times before addressing Harvey. "Sir, with all due respect, this is likely a fabricated, haphazardly drawn map. The positions of the main star and surrounding constellations don't correspond to any known coordinates in any star region." Although Harvey had been prepared, the astrologer's bluntness still left him feeling a sinking sensation in his stomach. The sudden tearing of the universe within the spirit anchor revealed a starry sky, and the coordinates of stars never before observed in the real world. This undoubtedly proved to Harvey that the starry sky that suddenly appeared within the spirit anchor wasn't a reflection of the present world, but most likely came from an unknown dimension. "Are you absolutely certain?" Harvey pressed on, still undeterred. "How do astrologers record and collect the coordinates of all the stars in the current world? Aren't you missing some star regions that are difficult to observe?" The astrologer smiled and shook his head, as if anticipating Harvey's question. He pulled a glittering crystal ball from his stored ring. "This is a star chart recorder, a common auxiliary magical tool used by astrologers." Melissa tapped her finger, injecting a small amount of magic power into the crystal ball, instantly activating it. The crystal ball instantly burst into dazzling light, and a brilliant reflection of the starry sky appeared on the study ceiling. As the astrologer continuously channeled magical power into the crystal ball, the reflection of the starry sky above rapidly shifted, and images of star fields with precisely recorded coordinates flashed before everyone's eyes. The star chart recorder is a resonance artifact. Any astrologer who records and collects new star coordinates and star fields can instantly perceive them through it. Melissa paused, then spoke with absolute certainty. "So I can confirm with absolute certainty that this star map has never appeared since astrologers began using recorders to collect star coordinates hundreds of years ago?" Amazing. It turned out that astrologers had developed a magical version of the database before him, but unfortunately, they had only applied it to resonance artifacts like the star chart recorder. What a waste of such advanced technology. Harvey sighed, took back the map the astrologer had handed back, and fell silent. Jin, who was sitting nearby, finally lost his patience and asked, "Sir Harvey, who fabricated this star map? Could it be that some other astrologer in the forum is using forged star maps and projected predictions to deceive you in a transaction?" Harvey shook his head and explained with a serious expression, "No, this is what I sensed when I was suddenly pulled into deep meditation during my experiment just now." Chapter 354 Forum Questions and Answers. Unknown star charts must never be analyzed rashly. This is a strict taboo for any high-level astrologer. Any rash attempt could not only lead to the erosion of the star of destiny connected to one's body, but also potentially attract strange monsters from another dimension, which could use the astrological coordinates to locate the caster's real-world location, bringing unforeseen disasters. Harvey certainly didn't want to force the astrologer to take such a risk just to complete an experiment for himself. "That's fine. I'm afraid the only way to find the answer to this question is to consult those legendary masters in the forum." Harvey waved his hand, soothingly. "Don't worry about it. Go back and rest." After sending off the two high-level bodyguards, Harvey remained awake. Leaving Arslan and Reiner to clean up the mess in the basement laboratory, he remained alone in his study, logging onto the spellcaster forum with ease. The magic brain device in the study had been modified by Chris and connected independently to the planetary energy gathering array underground. Simply donning a metal hood connected to the energy pipeline, Harvey could quickly channel his mental energy through the energy gathering array into the forum's back-end server. After all, the main operating module and virtual projection of the spellcaster forum were constantly located within Harvey's magic pattern in a companion state. While they didn't take up any additional magic ring space, Activating the back-end program still required a significant amount of pure magic power. After a familiar feeling of dizziness, Harvey quickly entered the forum server, composed of countless information streams and data modules. His mental projection quickly condensed and manifested, hovering within this virtual magic network space. With a thought, the data modules within the forum server, which had been interacting according to established rules, and the information flow runes that were rapidly transmitting back and forth, suddenly vibrated in unison, sensing Harvey's host's command and gathering around him. But for now, he had no desire to spy on the forum members' exchanges. Instead, he directly issued an information search command to the living source code, rapidly searching through thousands of pieces of information for anything related to star projection and starry sky coordinates, 1, 2, 3. The source code that hadn't received the command spontaneously dispersed from Harvey's side, leaving only the 3 lucky ones who had been handpicked to approach him, shaking their heads and tails. Only 3 relevant messages. Harvey frowned, a little annoyed. I remember there were more than just Ms. Astrologer on the forum. Could it be that this path of spellcasting is so unpopular that not many advanced spellcasters choose to pursue it as a secondary discipline? It seemed that when recruiting new members for the forum, he would have to consider selecting advanced spellcasters in unpopular fields to join, otherwise he would be hard-pressed to find professional help with difficult research problems. Harvey quickly scanned the 3 relevant messages and sighed with disappointment. I didn't expect astrological magic to be even more conservative and traditional than the undead factions. Besides a constant stream of combat techniques, there's surprisingly little theoretical research and exploration, but on second thought, it made sense. These people used to serve the royal families of the southern kingdoms, routinely observing the movements of the stars and performing simple, shallow prophecies. They also practiced a wide array of combat techniques and engaged in the brutal struggle for secular power. They had no time to settle down for experimental research. Harvey gently pushed away the 3 source codes carrying information and turned his gaze to the forum's backstage space. It was already midnight, and the forum still had only a few active members. Among the flickering symbols representing the forum members, the brightest and most dazzling one caught Harvey's eye. Mr. Scorching Lord is trapped beneath the LA mines. It seems he truly has nothing better to do. He's been surfing the internet 24/7, Scorching Lord, during deep meditation, suddenly sensing a completely unknown, alien starry sky? Tisk, that sounds terribly wrong. Harvey couldn't help but chuckle at the chief's merciless rant, and quickly gave a brief description of the legendary necromancy artifact, Sunset of the Dead, Scorching Overlord. I know this artifact. Before the Union was founded, before the decline of the undead caste, its existence was well known among legendary spellcasters. Of course, it wasn't the artifact's inherent power that earned it such renown, but rather its original owner, the first chancellor of the necromancer cult, a true legendary lich. He was also the last undead legend active in the southern realms since the end of the Dragon War, Kil'thuzad. It was precisely because of this artifact's peculiar properties that I sought to analyze its internal runic structure and sorcery models that the astral phenomenon you mentioned appeared. Scorching Overlord, haha, my young friend. While I'm well aware of your abilities, I must caution you regarding this matter. Even a high-level research mage should rashly attempt to analyze an ancient artifact passed down from antiquity, especially before you've fully grasped its origins. A spellcaster's fervent thirst for knowledge is naturally a powerful aid in their pursuit of truth, but the price of such fervor and daring is also clear to all. Just looking at the nearly 100 years since the Union's founding, the rate of accidental deaths among research casters in magical experiments even exceeds the number of battle mages killed in battle in the Evil Moon Mountains. Scorching Lord, however, if you truly desire to get to the bottom of this, I have an old friend who also practices astrology. I can put you in touch with him and have him attempt to decipher this dangerous alien star map. Harvey was surprised by the other party's sudden change of tone, offering him a glimmer of hope, and his spirits lifted. He persisted in analyzing the astral phenomena caused by the afterglow of the dead because he felt that the projection was inevitably connected to the necromancer temple, the entity projected within this legendary artifact. Perhaps the resolved coordinates will help him locate the true location of the necromancer temple, Kil'thuzad. That's excellent, Your Excellency. Regardless of whether the star map analysis is successful or not, I will pay you and your friend a satisfactory reward, Scorching Overlord. You can negotiate his reward directly with him. As for my share, shouldn't you ask the forum for me when I can escape from this boring underground mine? Chapter 355 Population Strategy. The combined forces of Grand Duke St. Valen and the Church of Radiance have suffered repeated setbacks and skirmishes with Danius. Goris has begun massively recruiting troops from neighboring vassal duchies in the name of the Papal State. The Legion of the Glorious Spear, stationed on the border of Isengard, appears to be planning to send troops into the central southern border. The royal family of the Duchy of Berkeley is divided over whether to respond to the Pope's call. Many of its noble fiefdoms have decided to independently send troops to reinforce St. Valen, tantamount to openly opposing the Union. The Church has begun sending demon slayers to attack the leaders of spellcasting organizations in the 7 wizarding kingdoms who openly oppose the resumption of civil war and accuse the Church of breaking the covenant. The number of leaders killed in the attacks is currently unknown. Harvey frowned, watching the endless stream of messages from various factions and small groups on the Spellcaster Forum, his heart growing heavier. It seemed that a full-scale civil war between the Spellcaster Union and the Church of Radiance was imminent. Not only was the forum buzzing with discussion recently, but even the major chambers of commerce that closely collaborated with Harvey seemed to have caught wind of the tense situation in the Central South Territory. They constantly sent friendly reminders to Harvey and expressed concerns about future business cooperation. After all, apart from arms dealers and human traffickers, no commercial organization was happy to see war. Not only would it destroy their painstakingly built distribution networks, it would also sever their already limited freight routes. Sir, the secret police have sent back information from southern St. Valen, as Dallin said, holding a stack of copied intelligence documents and detailing the results of their recent intelligence work. Except for the royal capital, Jinhu City, the aristocratic lord's rampant conscription and arbitrary tax increases have displaced a large number of civilians in the southern region, evading military service and taxes. Furthermore, the neighboring Grand Duke of Berkeley suddenly invaded, launching a campaign in the name of the Church against the previously neutral fiefdoms of southern St. Valen. Silverpine City and Black Mountain Port were destroyed in the war, leaving many surrounding fields and farms abandoned. Furthermore, with a harsh winter, the price of already scarce food skyrocketed, and the once strictly prohibited slave trade became active again. Although the intelligence network was relatively new, and the experience and capabilities of the secret police trained varied, the timeliness and accuracy of intelligence transmission were greatly guaranteed with a magic brain device. Harvey was well aware of the practices of those fiefdom nobles. Even if the fighting didn't extend beyond their borders, they would exploit the conflict as an excuse to exact heavy levies and settle scores with neighboring lords, both old and new, using the pretext of conscription to settle personal scores. It could be said that even before the Civil War truly broke out, the friction and conflict among the lesser nobles had already tormented the local populace. Relying solely on the secret police to secretly spread information and guide the people to flee to the borderlands of grisly territory is far too inefficient. Harvey muttered, rubbing his fingers together. As Dallin coughed lightly and reminded, the cooperative chambers of commerce are also trying their best to promote our recruitment policy, but the results are also very limited. Most people are unwilling to migrate long distances with their families in such a cold winter. The risks along the way are too great. Harvey nodded in agreement, stood up and walked to the wall where the map of St. Valen's borders was hung. He raised his hand and quickly outlined a winding black line with a thick charcoal pencil, which just overlapped with the Ralph River that originated in the Divine Ridge Mountains and flowed through the entire Principality of St. Valen. As Dallin was quick-witted and immediately asked, use shipping to directly absorb the transferred population. Yes, the source of the Ralph River is located on the border of Grizzly territory, but only the river section starting from Grizzly Castle is deep enough for navigation. The river becomes wider as it goes down. When it flows through Sancho Town, it reaches Jinhu City in the west and goes directly to Black Mountain Port in the south. Harvey drew a circle in Sancho Town with a charcoal pencil and said quietly, it only takes a day and a half to send troops from Grizzly Castle to the south by boat to arrive here. If we establish a population reception transit station here, we can completely open up the reception and transportation channel to the south. The section of the Ralph River north of Sancho Town is almost completely frozen in winter, and fishing and sailing are almost impossible. Unless you have a sturdy steel icebreaker like Harvey, who can rely on magic power equipment to ensure high-speed travel even upstream. Considering that Arstelin was a true old Northman, whose understanding of the southern situation was even less profound than that of Harvey, a research geek, they immediately summoned Dirt, who was familiar with the situation in St. Valen. Dirt was a man of swift action. After understanding Harvey's intentions, he explained frankly, "My lord, Sanchertown lies within the fiefdom of Grand Duke Ralph. Yes, the Ralph family, the one who named the Ralph River. They are based in Fingagan City, west of Sanchertown, and their fiefdom is several times larger than the grisly territory of the Fagan family. Grand Duke Ralph, a die-hard follower of St. Valen's founding of the state over a century ago, holds one of the largest fiefdoms in St. Valen. Despite his lukewarm relationship with the Church of Light, he nonetheless responded to the Grand Duke's call with a mixed force of nearly 2,000 regular knights and mercenaries. Such a large-scale military deployment means your excellency will have to leave his rear empty?" Harvey asked curiously. Dirt smiled bitterly and shook his head. Compared to the 200 or 300 elite knights under Count Fagan, this Duke Ralph is no show-off. At least half of his Fingagan knights are extraordinary knights with bloodline talent. The family also supports a number of independent spellcasters with good strength and has formed a mage advisory group. Most of these spellcasters employed by nobles and princes came from aristocratic families themselves. They would not stand on the side of the Federation because of their religious beliefs. It was considered a moderate attitude for them to remain neutral. Harvey nodded and said lightly, "I roughly understand. The bloodline knights and spellcaster advisors. The armed forces possessed by the nobles are really exactly the same in structure. This is true for Earl Fagan and Duke Ralph." He turned to Reiner, who was late, and ordered, "Notify the Ministry of Industry and send people to Grizzly Castle immediately. Complete the construction of the barge dock and shipbuilding workshop within a week." Dirt already knew the Lord's plan to use steel icebreakers to go south, but he was still confused when he heard him order the construction of docks and shipyards in Grizzly Castle now. "My lord, you are just starting to build the dock and shipyard now. Are you planning to take action against Duke Ralph after the spring?" Harvey laughed out loud at the young spellcaster's question. Reiner and Asdalen looked at each other, and explained with a smile in unison, "The cement dock can be built within a week. As for shipbuilding, since all the ship components have been cast in advance, they only need to be transported over and then assembled and welded on the spot. It can be launched in 3 days with full work. Steel icebreakers have long been modularized and mass-produced. All accessories are ready-made and stacked in the warehouse. Assembling a finished ship is not much more complicated than playing with building blocks." Chapter 356 Transport Channel. The next afternoon, Harvey, just as he was about to return to his bedroom after lunch, was intercepted by the hastily arrived Asdalen. "Sir, one of my secret police officers, headed to Porto Montenegro, has sent an urgent tip." Asdalen handed the transcribed message to Harvey. He was supposed to be spreading information covertly in the Porto Montenegro area, recruiting civilians with the help of the local cooperative Chamber of Commerce, and accidentally connected with a slave caravan active in the southern border. Asdalen sighed and continued, "This young man is too impatient. He wants to quickly gather a group of refugees for the return trip north. He made a deal with the slave caravan for 500 of their trafficked refugees for 20 silver pieces. Wow! Such a large deal in the illegal human trafficking business. They really dared to make a real deal." Harvey couldn't help but ask, why would the slave traders trust him for a transaction of several hundred gold pounds? "I remember that the funds allocated to the secret police's activities were not abundant. Indeed, this young man named Muller is so audacious that he actually wrote an IOU to the other party in the name of Count Fagan, the grisly leader. In order to forge their identities, you personally instructed Count Fagan to provide some legal identification documents for the secret police to use." Harvey nodded in understanding and couldn't help but admire, although he is impatient, he is indeed quick-witted and has a good ability to adapt to circumstances. Since secretly spreading news to recruit refugees is not effective, perhaps buying the civilians abducted by human traffickers from them is also a way. He paused and continued, "Then how do you plan to escort these 500 people back?" Asdalen smiled bitterly and said, "Muller's idea was almost the same as yours at the time. He originally planned to use the relationship with a local cooperative Chamber of Commerce to rent 3 cargo ships along the Ralph River to send people back. From Montenegro port to Sanchertown, the frozen river northwards made navigation impossible, forcing them to switch from water transport to land transport. The problem arose at this northern stopover. The Baron of Sanchertown, having somehow heard that a fleet under the banner of Count Fagan, the Grizzly Bear, would disembark at his town's dock, immediately seized Mueller and his crew, boat and crew, and, on a whim, imposed a hefty population movement tax on them. The Baron of Sanchertown has Grand Duke Ralph as his backer, and he doesn't take the Earl of Grizzly territory seriously at all. I have sent a letter to Earl Fagin to inquire. The two sides have always had friction over shipping and cargo issues, and Grizzly territory has always been strangled by Sancher Town on the Ralph River. Harvey couldn't help but find it funny. He deceived the human traffickers under the guise of Earl Fagin, but in the end he was inexplicably blamed for the old grudge between Earl Fagin's family and the Baron's family of Sancher Town. Now Earl Fagin must be wishing that he could send troops to Sancher Town immediately to give the obsessed Baron a little bit of military shock. I didn't expect that in the end, Count Fagin would take revenge on us and use our power to bully others. Harvey shook his head. Let Count Fagin write a letter to Sancher Town to stabilize the other side and ensure the basic safety of our personnel. Then send the two icebreakers newly launched in Grizzly Castle to Sancher Town to rescue people a week later. This young secret policeman named Mueller seemed to have caused a big trouble for Harvey, but he accidentally inspired Harvey in the way of population recruitment. Reiner, immediately send a letter to the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce, the Andrew Chamber of Commerce, and the Herald Chamber of Commerce. Have them cooperate with the secret police we've sent over to connect with the local active human traffickers. Reiner and Asdalen exchanged a look of surprise. Sir, are we planning to buy people directly from the slave traders? The territory steward's alchemical brain immediately began to calculate at high speed. Within half a minute, he said in a pained tone, even though the price of human trafficking has plummeted recently due to the civil war in St. Valen and the winter food shortage. But if you want to buy people from these black market traders who are already engaged in illegal business, you still need to pay a large sum of money. Harvey shook his head and smiled bitterly. Gold pounds and silver coins are useless in the territory's treasury. We are different from those greedy and short-sighted southern nobles. Fresh human labor is the most valuable. 20 silver coins per commoner serf wasn't cheap, primarily because Mueller and his men were too impatient and didn't properly negotiate a lower price with the traffickers. After all, human trafficking isn't like merchandise. People won't get sick, die, or flee, and they won't consume the already precious winter grain. Everyone wants to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Young serfs can be bought at the normal price of 20 silver coins, but we need the elderly and children just as much. We'll just try to keep the price as low as possible. I'm sure the traffickers will be eager to buy these burdens off their hands, and they might even be willing to give them to us as a gift. Reiner asked cautiously, so, how many serfs are we planning to buy this time? Harvey smiled. You and Asdalen are much better at math than I am. With a budget of 20,000 gold pounds, how many people can we buy from southern St. Valen? It all depends on your strategic planning. Using money to buy people is a desperate measure, forced by the current urgency. Taking in as many people as possible for the frontier territory before the civil war erupted would naturally be the best option. However, waiting for war to break out would also result in a massive exodus of refugees from their homes. This would be when Harvey's earlier propaganda campaign would immediately take effect. Compared to fleeing to foreign lands beyond St. Valen, the Grizzly territory, though located further north on the frontier, was at least within the country, offering a greater sense of security. Furthermore, with the backing of Count Fagin, the nominally Great Lord of the frontier, he promised to provide subsistence work for the refugees and serfs who had migrated there, ensuring they would not face the uncertainty of their future. However, Harvey had not forgotten his most important task. If the population of the wasteland territory increased significantly, food supplies would inevitably become scarce. Once the war broke out, he feared he would no longer have the opportunity to import large quantities of grain from the southern border. The grain trade, tightly controlled by the Chamber of Commerce and the nobility, would inevitably see prices inflated. Notify Pep, the engineering director of the North Slope base, to come see me. Harvey slapped his head and ordered the guards in the study. Asdalen was a little confused. North Slope base? My lord, is there something wrong with the underground energy ranch? Harvey raised his hand and pointed to the map of the area spread out on the desk. The center was the Eastern Valley Basin plain surrounded by mountains. It was also a fertile virgin land that had always puzzled them. They didn't know how to start developing and pioneering. I thought about it for a long time, and finally decided to start the development plan for the Eastern Basin before the spring. Harvey picked up a charcoal pencil and drew a thick vertical line through the mountain range that stretched between the east coast of the Pioneer Territory and the Basin Plain. I planned to use a living shield machine to directly penetrate this mountain range and dig a 3-mile-long straight underground tunnel as a transportation route connecting the Pioneer Territory and the Basin Plain. Chapter 357 The Caliber of Justice. Despite the bitter cold of winter, The new Earl of Fagin, Trevor Fagin, tirelessly traveled frequently between Grizzled Castle and the frontier territory, spending several days in the wilderness almost every month for various reasons. Life in the northern wilderness was, of course, more comfortable and luxurious than he had anticipated, from the constantly warm homes to the diverse and unique food offerings. Even for a border earl, indulging in a wide variety of delicious food and wine during the winter months, when supplies were scarce and trade was hindered, was a considerable luxury. But Earl Fagin was no foolish nobleman obsessed with pleasure. Since pledging his allegiance to Harvey, the new earl not only thoroughly purged the Fagin family, severely punishing those who remained disloyal, but also actively wooed his vassal nobles, persuading them to fully align with Harvey and support the border king. Of course, Harvey duly reciprocated the earl's positive attitude. The Fagin family's mining districts had been fully equipped with magical mining machines before winter, increasing coal and iron ore extraction efficiency several-fold. Harvey also allocated a portion of the sales of some of the Pioneer Territory's specialty products to the Fagin family's Chamber of Commerce, allowing them to snag a share of the profits from other major chambers of commerce at the recent Wasteland Fair. All of these actions undoubtedly taught Earl Fagin and all of his vassal nobles a lesson: as long as they sincerely submitted to this powerful wasteland lord, they would almost immediately reap tangible benefits. Unlike the former royal families who were only too good at making empty promises, their new king rewarded their loyalty with real money. "My lord, where are you going to have fun today?" One of the lord's personal guards bowed to Earl Fagin with a smile and took the initiative to suggest, "Although the weather is cold, it hasn't snowed in the past few days. Is your lordship interested in going out of town to hunt? This season is a good opportunity to hunt giant ice bears." Earl Fagin gathered the bearskin cloak he had just bought from a high-end clothing store in the market area not long ago, and replied helplessly, "I don't have the powerful strength of you bloodline warriors. Even if I go hunting, I'll just be a spectator. Where's the fun in that? Besides, isn't the ice bear skin draped over me right now?" Although the several personal guards sent by Harvey himself were nominally to protect the personal safety of his lordship, everyone knew that their also task was to monitor Earl Fagin, always reminding him not to go to places he shouldn't go, and not to ask about things he shouldn't ask. "I wonder if your excellency is free today? I would like to meet with your excellency in person and report to him on recent affairs." Although Earl Fagin had been turned down several times, he still did not give up and repeatedly asked for an audience every time he came to the Pioneer Territory. The personal guard smiled helplessly, and when he was about to reject the other party's request again, two other personal guards suddenly came in from outside the hotel door. "Your Excellency, the Lord invites you to go to the dock area after lunch to watch the test firing of new weapons. I wonder if you are interested." Of course, before the other party finished speaking, Earl Fagin responded without hesitation, "Of course I am interested. Please lead the way." The personal guard smiled and waved his hand. "No hurry, no hurry, it's afternoon, and the Lord is used to taking an hour's break after lunch. Please wait a moment." It was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Earl Fagin finally saw Lord Harvey, who was sleepy and covered in a thick fur robe, at the dock area. He quickly put on a flattering smile and greeted him. "Your Excellency, I'm truly honored to have you here today to view the new weapon." Harvey waved his hand and said calmly, "No problem. I just happened to notice you were still in the territory, so I asked you to come and see." He then nodded to Chris, who was waiting nearby. The head of the alchemy lab immediately stepped forward and began to explain the details of the new weapon that would be tested. "This is a new weapon developed by the alchemy lab in collaboration with the territory's military factory. It's a brand new magic-powered naval cannon based on the existing magic-powered cannon design." Chris pulled back the tarpaulin covering his body, revealing the new weapon. The metal barrel was longer than the magic-powered cannon, smooth and silver gray. The rear end of the barrel was more complex. Besides the slot for the mounting bracket, there was also an ammunition loading chamber at the bottom and two tubular mechanisms, one long and one short. Compared to the magic-powered cannon, the magic-powered naval cannon boasts several technological improvements. It can be mounted directly on city walls as a defensive artillery piece, offering a wider firing angle. Furthermore, its primary application is to be mounted on steel icebreakers, leveraging their high-speed movements to provide mobile firepower. Count Fagin was stunned, and he couldn't help but turn his head quietly. He noticed that the nobles who had also been invited to observe the weapon test were equally stunned. They understood every word of the weapon's introduction, but the whole thing was completely incomprehensible. Fortunately, They were all adept at superficiality. Despite being completely clueless, they still led the applause, leaving Harvey wondering if these country bumpkins understood or were just pretending. Ahem, Harvey cleared his throat awkwardly. Then let's not waste time. Let's conduct the test fire now. Chris nodded, and the two technicians beside him sprang into action, picking up their nearby alchemical communicators and mumbling messages. Then, the icebreaker, anchored on the wide river, hummed, belching thick plumes of white steam from its roof as it slowly slid towards the river where the group was. As it passed the center of the river, the ship's sailors expertly dropped a long string of large red buoy targets, which drifted sparsely about 1,000 meters from the shore. The two gunners on the shore waited for another signal from the ship before operating the magical naval cannon in tacit coordination. One pushed open the hatch at the rear of the barrel, while the other immediately inserted a silver, pointed iron can into the barrel and closed the gun port. Report. Loaded, aim, safety on, fire. Request to fire. Chris turned to his lord, signaling him to give the order. Harvey nodded. Everyone, cover your ears. Fire. Before anyone could recover from their shock, they followed Harvey's instructions and covered their ears when a loud explosion suddenly erupted beside them. Earl Fagin felt his head buzz, and all around him suddenly quieted, leaving only the thumping of his heart and his own trembling breaths. A ball of orange-red flame erupted from the metal barrel, even more dazzling than the flashes of the magic-powered cannon he had witnessed before. The dock beneath him seemed to tremble slightly, and a scorching wave of air rushed towards him, causing him to take 2 steps back, only to be saved from falling flat on his face by a hand from one of the Lord's personal guards behind him. The magic cannon, seemingly due to the firing, suddenly recoiled and sank, but quickly and steadily returned to its original position. Harvey pulled 2 balls of cotton from his ears and turned to say something to Earl Fagin, but the Earl shook his head palely, his head buzzing. He was stunned for half a minute before he could barely hear the Lord's words. Are you okay? Didn't I tell you to cover your ears? Earl Fagin opened his mouth, shook his head in panic, and tiptoed to shift his gaze to the targets in the middle of the river. The targets had disappeared. No. There was clearly a long string of buoy targets on the river. Where had they gone? Chris quickly answered everyone's doubts. This new weapon can launch magic shells to attack distant enemies just like a magic-powered cannon, but compared to before, we have made certain damage improvements, from single-point damage to large-scale coverage damage. Harvey took the telescope and observed the river surface, and asked, is 1,000 meters the basic shooting range? Yes, the maximum shooting distance can reach 3,000 meters, but if we fire a shot at such a long distance, we won't be able to observe the effect of the bombardment, Chris continued proudly. According to the ideas and inspiration provided by the Lord, we added dragon flame powder to the magic shells. Although it causes a huge noise when the shells are fired, the range damage of the shelling has increased several times. This is the power of magic bloom bombs. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Magic Bomb. Not long after, the second round of test firing began. This time, Earl Fagin and the other young noble students had blocked their ears, only to discover that it wasn't the cannon on the dock that was firing, but rather the deafening roar from the ironclad icebreaker that had sailed from the river into the deep waters of the dock. Due to the distance of several dozen meters, while the metal cannon mounted on the ship still emitted an earth-shaking roar, it fortunately didn't shake anyone off their feet. The ironclad's magic cannon was clearly less stable than the cannons fixed to the dock. The firing caused the immensely heavy ship to shake slightly, and the barrel itself was propelled by the recoil before quickly and accurately returning to its original position. Again, 2 people worked in unison, opening the rear magazine, inserting a pointed shell, closing the magazine, engaging the safety, aiming and firing. This cycle repeated itself, completing 5 high-speed, level shots within 3 minutes, aimed at a fixed target farther away on the other side of the river. Count Fagin could sense the fury of a new shell blasting out almost every half-minute, the frozen soil and snow on the other side of the river being violently lifted into the air. The target was completely shattered by the second shot, and subsequent shots were equally swift, their trajectory indistinguishable to the naked eye. Judging from the time it took for the cannon to fire and the smoke to rise from the other side, Count Fagin concluded that even if the target was an elite, highly mobile bloodline knight, It would likely be impossible to escape its range. He glanced back at the group of noble students behind him, finding them staring blankly at the heavy metal cannon before them, their eyes filled with undisguised fear and fervor. Compared to what happened to his predecessor, Count Fagin, if Lord Harvey employed this even more powerful new weapon against a coalition of nobles, I'm afraid the families of these young men would have no chance of redeeming their elders with money or loyalty. They might even have trouble collecting their bodies intact. Is this a weapon developed jointly by spellcasters and alchemists? After a long pause, Count Fagin swallowed and asked cautiously. The answer surprised the nobles present. Where did all those spellcasters and alchemists come from? Harvey laughed. This is a joint effort of magic and ordinary workers. The alchemists were only responsible for mixing the ammunition and enchanting the cannon. The metal smelting and casting of the barrel were all handled by the steelworks technicians. Count Fagin's heart skipped a beat, and a terrifying thought occurred to him. This thing, can it be mass-produced in a workshop? During the continuous test firing, Commander Pierce stood by with a look of enthusiasm. As the Army's chief commander, he had a deeper understanding of the power and utility of these new naval guns than the short-sighted southern nobles. Once they were aboard the armored icebreakers, the primary problem of the heavy and difficult-to-transport magic-powered cannons would be solved. They would allow for rapid, sweeping fire, a longer range, and enhanced area of effect damage. He was almost certain that with an armored fleet of more than 10 naval guns, they could easily sail down the river from Grizzly Castle's docks all the way to Golden City, the capital of St. Valen. While everyone was whispering, Pierce quickly walked to Chris and asked in a low voice, "What is the production volume of this new type of artillery shells? How many new naval guns can each of the 3 ironclad ships that have been launched be equipped with?" Chris was stunned for a moment, but faced with the urgent questioning of the army commander, he answered honestly, After mixing in the dragon flame powder, the liquid magic energy required for the artillery shells is much less, but, since it is a test firing, we have only rushed to produce a small number of artillery shells, and the last round of shelling has almost consumed half of them." Pierce felt colder than the winter in the north when he heard this. He grabbed Chris's arm and said hurriedly, "Quickly persuade the Lord to stop the test firing. God, my heart is bleeding." In fact, Harvey was also in great pain. Every time he fired a shell with high cost and low production, he felt as if a piece of flesh fell off his body. In order to pretend in front of this group of southern nobles, he forced himself to endure it. It was essential to flex his muscles in public, to demonstrate his ever-growing strength. The test firing of the new weapon went smoothly, its power and effectiveness exceeding expectations. I'm sure these aristocratic students and Earl Fagin himself will etch this unforgettable moment into their hearts, forever forsaking any further evil intentions. After the test firing of the new weapon, Harvey, for the first time, invited Earl Fagin to dinner. After the afternoon's events, the Earl's demeanor was noticeably more humble, even his words becoming much less pronounced. "Your Excellency, are you coming to the wilderness this time just to buy some ice-filled vodka?" Harvey asked calmly while eating. "I remember that the vodka store in Grizzly Castle seems to have started business." The Earl quickly put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth, and said straight to the point, "Your Excellency, actually I came here this time to ask about your views on the use of troops in Sancha Town. It's just that I haven't found a suitable opportunity for you to summon me." Harvey nodded and responded without comment, "You only need to cooperate with the construction of the Grizzly Castle dock and shipyard, and don't worry too much about anything else." Earl Fagin rubbed his hands awkwardly, and said anxiously, "As a fiefdom earl who has formally sworn allegiance to you, I would like to request that the family's elite knights and mercenaries be dispatched across the border to fight for you in the war in Sancha Town." He paused, as if recalling something, and quickly added, "The nobles of the other fiefdoms of Grizzly territory are equally eager to fight for you. At the very least, after swearing fealty to you, give them a chance to prove their loyalty. When a shark hunts, a large school of smaller fish, in a symbiotic relationship with it, eagerly surrounds it, hoping to snag a few scraps of flesh as it tears and shares its prey. Elite knights and mercenaries," Harvey chuckled. "Honestly, my army and gunboats don't seem to need that kind of support." Count Fagin certainly understood that the nobles' meticulously trained knights and armed mercenaries were little more than paper maca compared to their magical cannons and ironclad ships, but Harvey's blunt remark still made him feel deeply ashamed. "But everyone's attitude is commendable." Harvey changed the subject and took the initiative to calm the Earl's emotions. "Although the main battle does not require your contribution, The logistics and supplies along the way and the subsequent population transfer require you who are familiar with the surrounding noble territories to handle them flexibly for me. After taking Sancher Town, Your Excellency, which noble do you think I should send to temporarily manage this important river port for me? Earl Fagin trembled, raised his head with a little excitement and looked at Harvey. Chapter 359 Battle Plan. 3 days later, Harvey arrived at Grizzly Castle with Earl Fagin. This was his first time back to the south since relocating to the northern wastes 3 years prior. Earl Fagin's family and a number of vassal nobles were already waiting outside Grizzly Castle to welcome their new lord. This time, Harvey was accompanied by a battalion of Northern Army soldiers, who were responsible for rotating out the Northern Army originally stationed at Grizzly Castle, while also shouldering the external combat mission south to Sancher Town. The rotation of the garrison naturally fell to the officers of the battalion headquarters. Harvey, accompanied by Commander-in-Chief Pierce and his entourage, declined Earl Fagin's invitation to the Earl's mansion and went directly to the City Guard command post, which had been transformed into the Grizzly Castle City Hall. According to reliable information, after the Baron of Sancher Town detained our people, it seems that he has no intention of releasing them before receiving the money. Harvey sat in the main seat at the top of the City Hall, looking down at the officials and nobles. The other party's behavior, whether it is due to past grudges with the Fagin family or sudden greed, will undoubtedly require them to pay the price. He raised his hand and nodded to Earl Fagin, who was sitting below, signaling him. Based on your Excellency's understanding of the Baron's family of Sancher Town, will they make arrangements in advance to guard against our sudden offensive? Earl Fagin was obviously prepared. After Harvey asked, he immediately stood up and talked. Your lord, as far as I know, the Baron of Sancher Town is not a wise and sensible man. Otherwise Grand Duke Ralph would not have given up on recruiting him to join the war. This idiot Baron who rose to power entirely through nepotism doesn't even have a complete cavalry unit under his command? Oh? Not even a vassal knight? Harvey asked in surprise. Isn't he an orthodox hereditary baron? A minor noble whose family was engaged in shipping trade took the initiative to step forward and answered with disdain and resentment. Your lord, this guy used to be just a river transport tax collector in Sancher Town. It wasn't until his sister became Grand Duke Ralph's fifth wife that he was given the title of Baron. But we have always jokingly called him the Watchdog Baron. It's no wonder. A nobleman without farmland like this couldn't maintain the dignity expected of a baron without resorting to plundering. Standing on a crucial river route like Sancher Town, he could easily fleece passing merchant caravans and live a life of luxury. After being savaged by the Grizzly Territory nobles, Harvey's mobilization of ironclad warships south to Sancher Town suddenly seemed like an overkill. After dismissing the group, Harvey left Commander Pierce alone. In truth, he hadn't revealed his true intelligence to the Grizzly Territory nobles. The Baron of Sancher Town was indeed a short-sighted fool, but Grand Duke Ralph was not. Ever since the previous Earl Fagin and the Church's coalition forces were defeated on the border, Grizzly Territory had come under the de facto control of Harvey, the Mage Lord. This series of events had long alerted Grand Duke Ralph. It's hard to say whether the Sancher Town Baron's sudden abduction had Grand Duke Ralph's tacit approval or intimation. But it's undeniable that the Grand Duke's fleet and some of his elite knights had secretly assembled a week prior, and had already sailed from Fingagan City to Sancher Town 2 days prior. As for the land forces, leave it to those eager and willing Grizzlies nobles. They won't be able to contribute much anyway, so serving as a lure is already a plus, Harvey said to Pierce, leaning over the map spread out on the table. This was Pierce's first time fighting in the southern border, and he had never experienced a dual-front engagement. Naturally, he looked on in awe. Without waiting for Harvey to ask, he had spent days poring over and conferring with his officers on a battle plan. The Ralph River forks at Sancher Town, a suitable location for a battle. Pierce pointed to a bend in the river upstream of Sancher Town and analyzed. The ironclad ships need to be held here. To the south, they can bombard the Sancher Town docks, and to the west, they can directly block Grand Duke Ralph's fleet on the river. Grand Duke Ralph's troops are sailing ships. It will take approximately 2 days to reach Sancher Town from Fingagan City. Harvey gave a direct order. The Northern Army will set out tonight and arrive at the designated battle site tomorrow evening. Pierce asked in confusion, don't we have to wait for the assembled troops of the Grizzly Territory nobles? Harvey shook his head and smiled. It's better if they lag behind slowly, so that the spies sent by Grand Duke Ralph can mistakenly believe they can ambush us in advance. After the two men finished their discussion, Harvey patted Pierce on the shoulder and said, "It's a pity that I can't travel south with you on the ironclad ships and personally command the Northern Army. This is our first naval battle, and a direct confrontation with the Southern Territory nobles." Pierce, assuming Harvey's words hinted at a lack of confidence in his command, bowed and said, "Sir, rest assured. I will command this operation and will decisively defeat Duke Ralph for you and seize control of Sancher Town." This inexplicable verbal military order left Harvey in a state of confusion. That night, at the docks outside Grizzly Castle, 3 ironclad icebreakers, ready for launch, lay quietly anchored at the deep-water docks. Bright torches lit the embankment. 500 Northern Army soldiers lined up in silent formation, boarding the vessels one by one at the command of their superiors. With 3 whistles, the icebreakers' magical power instruments activated to full power. The sharp steel rams at the front of the icebreakers shattered the frozen river ice. With a teeth-grinding crackle of ice, they sped ever faster down the Ralph River. Pierce stood at the bow of the first icebreaker, unaffected by the night's icy wind and snow, his mind replaying the battle plan his lord had personally laid out before setting out. Upon arrival at the designated combat position, deploy some troops to land on both sides of the river and establish a defensive perimeter. Once Duke Ralph's fleet enters the ambush section, utilize the icebreaker's high maneuverability to encircle the Duke's fleet from 2 flanks. Once the 3 icebreakers complete the triangle, unleash a coordinated artillery barrage on the enemy. If Duke Ralph's fleet, regardless of casualties, insists on breaking out of the encirclement and attempting a landing, the ambushed troops on both sides will immediately intercept them, leaving them vulnerable to monodarts on the exposed riverbank. As for the incompetent Baron garrison in Sancher Town, after dispatching Baron Ralph's elite night fleet en route, they'll fire a few artillery rounds at Sancher Town from afar. The town will likely raise the white flag of surrender immediately. Pierce's only worry at the moment was the 500 serfs detained in Sancher Town. After nearly a week of freezing cold weather, lack of food and clothing, he didn't know how many healthy laborers could survive. Chapter 360, Sancher Town Raid, Part 1. The steel icebreaker, its magical power instruments operating at full capacity, steamed across the frozen river under cover of night. Occasionally, the bow could be heard clacking as it broke through the brittle ice. From Grizzly Castle southward, the river widened, and the winter moon, shining on the snowy riverbanks, provided ample light for navigation at night, eliminating the need for ships to run aground or onto reefs. While numerous villages and towns lined the riverbanks, in the dead of winter, no one noticed the 3 ghostly, unsailed vessels silently passing through the frozen river. The next afternoon, the ironclad arrived at the designated battle site earlier than Harvey had anticipated. Mist hung heavy over the water, scattered only by a few floating ice floes. It was here that the Ralph River split into 2 branches, one heading south to Black Mountain Port, the other westward past Fingigin City and on to Golden Radiant City, the capital of St. Valen. A light snow was falling, causing visibility to be very low along the entire Sancher River. After the ship docked, Pierce summoned all the middle and lower-level officers and began to make intensive arrangements. The enemy's fleet is coming from the river in the direction of Fingigin City, so our main force needs to hold both banks. He pointed to the spread-out map and simply drew the position of the ambush in advance. Your task is to prevent the enemy from abandoning their ships and landing, and at the same time cut off their retreat on the river, so you must hide first, and then close the door and fight the dog after they pass. The troops that went out to fight with Pierce this time were the battalion led by Wayne. He naturally shouldered the main task of blocking the enemy on both banks. "Commander, I don't quite understand," Wayne scratched his head and said puzzledly. "There is no problem for us to ambush on both banks, but we can let the enemy's fleet go directly." "What if they don't dock at all and go straight to Sancher Town?" Pierce sneered and took out 3 coins from his arms, representing 3 ironclad ships. 2 of them were placed exactly at the south fork of the Sancher River, and the remaining one was stationary at their current mooring position. 2 ironclads hold the southern section of the river. They can't get through. Pierce then turned to the artillery and gave a succinct order. Artillery Section 4 will remain on board to man the naval guns. The remaining 4 sections will follow the ambush teams ashore. This way, when the enemy fleet officially entered the fork of the Ralph River, it would be trapped on 3 sides. Sailing south would directly encounter the 2 ironclads. While the northern section was only guarded by 1 ironclad, it couldn't travel very fast upstream, making it an even more vulnerable target for the artillery. Of course, if the enemy rashly turned and fled or simply abandoned their ships and went ashore, The artillery teams ambushed on both sides of the western estuary would be in full effect. With such close range, they could almost hide a sailboat in the middle of the river with their eyes closed. Unexpectedly, Archduke Ralph's fleet arrived at the mouth of the Sancha River half a day later than Pierce had predicted. It wasn't until the evening of the second day after they set up their ambush that 8 medium-sized sailing ships slowly appeared in the western section of the Sancha River. Upon receiving the news, Artillery Captain Bobcat immediately issued preparatory orders to his riverbank battery, and the 2 batteries on each side of the river immediately sprang into action. "These guys are slower than turtles," Wayne, picking up a telescope, peered out of the short trench and peered down the river. After landing and setting up their defenses, they had expected to see the enemy early the next morning. However, they were late, forcing the soldiers to wait in the icy trenches for the better part of a day. Gunner Bobcat leaned over and whispered to Wayne, "If Commander Pierce gave the order, my riverbank battery could hit those turtles floating on the river right now. They're so close, we don't even need precise aim." Wayne rolled his eyes and scolded, "Who would dare fire without orders? Besides, there are only 4 guns on the riverbank, and there are 8 ships on the other side, 2 of which are sandwiched in between. No matter how powerful your shells are, can they really penetrate an entire ship and hit the one in the middle?" Bobcat scratched his head and chuckled awkwardly. Compared to the ordinary Northern Army soldiers wielding magic guns, the artillery crews who had mastered the magic-powered cannons were clearly more confident in their weapons. Ordinary soldiers still had to worry about their accuracy, and in emergencies and encounters, they were occasionally forced to use bayonets to engage the enemy in close combat. The bloody and brutal fighting also tested their courage. But the artillery was different. The overwhelming power of their magic-powered cannons, coupled with their unique attack methods capable of inflicting damage at extremely long ranges, had long since lost the tension of battle. They simply repeated the routines memorized during training, loading shells according to the prescribed procedures, aiming according to the prescribed procedures, and firing according to the prescribed procedures, and victory was assured. This was especially true when rotating through the valley outposts against the fell orcs. Even though the enemy was a powerful, fearless, and undaunted humanoid beast, they simply stayed atop the fortress, repeating the repetitive reloading and firing procedures. A battle could be over in half an hour, and the intensity and fatigue of the combat were even less intense than the training marches around the territory. Ready to attack, load, the artillery positions on the riverbank immediately became busy. The preparatory procedures had been practiced so many times that the artillerymen could load a shell into the magazine with their eyes closed, release the safety in 5 seconds, and, without worrying about the angle of fire a flat-line round in 30 seconds. But the Lynx waited for the command to fire from Commander Pierce on the ironclad ship. Archduke Ralph's fleet had already slowly passed them, officially entering the Sancha River estuary. Compared to the multi-masted sailing ships sailing at sea, river sailing ships were significantly smaller and lower. When the winter winds weakened, teams of sailors sat on both sides of the deck, furiously paddling their oars. Battalion Commander Wayne, growing increasingly impatient, whispered to Bobcat, "What's going on? Does the commander want us to just let them pass?" Before he could finish, a sudden, resounding boom echoed from the previously calm river. Within seconds, 2 more muffled booms rippled like thunder. The gun crews aboard the armored icebreakers opened fire. Wayne and Lynx simultaneously locked onto their sights, locking onto targets on the river. They could hardly believe their eyes as 2 plumes of black smoke suddenly rose from the deck of the leading enemy sailboat. Flames erupted, showering debris and broken limbs. Sailors rowing closely together were killed and wounded by shrapnel shells, leaving blood and viscera splattered across the deck. Lynx also clearly saw through the sights a fully armored knight blown off the mast, his upper body remaining. "Ugh," the artillery captain retched, earning a sneer from the battalion commander, Wayne, beside him. Chapter 361, Sancha Town Raid, Part 2. After the heavy casualties suffered by the sailors aboard the first sailing vessel, Archduke Ralph's fleet immediately lost most of its forward momentum. The other ships to the rear also slowed, turning their bows to try to circumvent the crippled lead ship in the middle of the river. However, the roar of exploding shells continued unabated, recurring every half-minute, accompanied by a sudden burst of flames from the enemy ships. Soon after, the towering mast of a ship stranded in the middle of the river snapped, and it toppled sideways, crushing another nearby vessel. Several horses, tethered to the deck, broke free and, in their panic, knocked over several knights before plunging into the icy water. The severely damaged ship remained completely paralyzed in the middle of the river. The remaining ships to the rear were crowded with people, many huddled at the bows, bewildered, seemingly unsure of the attack. Simultaneously, artillery fire from the riverbank followed. The crowded decks immediately became a river of blood. Almost every shell that found its target exploded a cloud of blood among the enemy, a thick, bloody mess covering the deck. Some, though not directly in the line of fire, were instantly ripped apart by the hurling metal shrapnel and deck debris, wailing and clutching at their severed limbs and flowing intestines. Those who had managed to avoid a bombardment abandoned their heavy weapons and armor and leaped into the water, preferring to freeze to death in the icy waters rather than remain a moment longer on the hull ships whirling with blood and fire. I was worried the enemy would recklessly rush through the fork and head straight for the Sanchertown docks, Wayne muttered softly, lowering his telescope. I never thought 3 ironclads, armed with only 6 magical cannons, could stop the enemy fleet right at the fork in the river. Compared to the ground troops observing from afar on the riverbank, Commander Pierce, aboard the icebreaker, had a more direct view of the battle. 3 ironclad ships, each guarding the northern and southern forks of the river, were anchored horizontally in the center of the channel. The 2 fixed magical cannons at the bow and stern, swiveled by the windlass, were aimed squarely at the enemy fleet approaching from the west. The targets were no more than 500 meters apart, and the artillery crews methodically repeated the prescribed aiming and firing routine. Teams of 4 repeatedly loaded pointed shells into the magazines at the rear of the barrels, then released the safety, pulled the trigger, and unleashed the shells, a mixture of dragon flame powder and iron shrapnel, with thunderous force. Even though he was commanding the battle from the cockpit mid-rear, Pierce's exceptionally keen hearing was still tormented by the rumbling of artillery fire. He instinctively raised his hand to tighten the cotton plugs in his ears, muttering to himself in confusion. These artillerymen seemed to prefer the rumble of magical naval guns to the magical cannons on the riverbank. Don't they hate this horrible, jarring noise? The strong, acrid odor of the dragonstone-infused shells, like a strange odor of sulfur mixed with rust, filled the ship, making even a vampire with such keen senses as Pierce nauseous. With another burst of cannon fire, the heavy ironclad ship trembled slightly. In the blink of an eye, the shell transformed into a dark shadow, barely perceptible to the naked eye, and flew straight towards the enemy ship several hundred meters away, blasting a massive hole in the wooden hull before bursting into the cabin and exploding. The immensely powerful Pierce immediately saw a stream of debris mingled with blood and flesh from the hole in the side of the ship. It seemed the enemy hiding in the hold hadn't escaped the barrage. A gentle river breeze carried an intensely rich, bloody odor, making Pierce feel as if he were at a lavish banquet, his mouth and nose filled with a sweet aroma. His throat churned slightly as he gave an icy command, activate the magic devices, close to the enemy fleet. Archduke Ralph's fleet, upon spotting 3 strange, unsailed ships in the distance, also began to slowly move closer to the shore. Apparently, they had finally realized a brutal attack was coming from those strange vessels. Seeing the enemy approaching, they hurried to shore to escape. The ironclad ships were moving at breakneck speed, and turning back and escaping the river in the wrecked sails was impossible. Only by gathering the remaining troops and reaching the shore could they hope for survival. Unfortunately, even after their boats recklessly ran aground on the riverbank and abandoned their ships, the Northern Army soldiers, long ambushed along both sides of the river, immediately opened fire without mercy. Long magical rifle barrels rested on the trenches, aiming at random targets scrambling wet from the icy water. With a flick of the trigger, magical bullets rained down on the enemy. On the bare riverbank, devoid of any cover, the enemies, who had just thought they had escaped, fell like wheat ears in the rain. Then the entire fleet collapsed. Those who had jumped to shore cried out, trying to get back on board. Those who had tried to escape huddled against the sides, cursing and shouting. Many more, in panic, simply turned around and plunged into the river, swimming desperately for the other side. The riverbank was a scene of blood and flesh flying, people and horses falling, and chaos reigned. 3 armored icebreakers were sailing right in the middle of the river. The soldiers aboard, leaning against the sides with their mono-rifles raised, fired at the struggling enemies in the water, spraying blood on the surface. Wayne emptied his 3rd magazine and ordered expressionlessly, "Almost done. Cooperate with the 3 icebreakers to clear the battlefield. Capture any enemies who manage to survive. Spare those lying on the ground, barely breathing. Don't waste the medicine." The soldiers loaded their magazines with new, full magazines, fixed their mono-rifles with sharp bayonets, and then, In neat formation, leaped out of the trenches and pressed forward against a few remaining enemies on the riverbank. Beside Pierce on the boat stood a young man, clearly dressed as an alchemist apprentice, jotting down notes in a booklet and muttering to himself. Both shrapnel shells and magic shells can penetrate wooden hulls, causing area of effect penetrating damage with excellent effects, but these two types of shells cannot directly sink a medium-sized sailing ship. The hull is riddled with holes like a sieve, but it didn't sink directly due to the large amount of water entering. Tisk. The effect in this aspect is poor. Pierce asked speechlessly, "Why are you recording these? Isn't a battle just about paying attention to the outcome, casualties, and ammunition consumption?" The young alchemist closed the booklet with a smile and bowed politely. "Your Excellency the Commander, this is what the Lord asked for. Every time a new weapon is put into actual combat, the use effect must be strictly and accurately recorded to facilitate subsequent upgrades and improvements of weapons and ammunition, weapon and ammunition upgrades and improvements. Can the Lord create new weapons that are more powerful than the automatic magic guns and magic naval cannons in the future?" Pierce felt his scalp tingling slightly. If things continued like this, would there be a day when he would not even have the chance to fight the enemy face to face when commanding his army? He would only need to rigidly and repetitively manipulate these magic weapons to annihilate the enemy from thousands of miles away? Chapter 362, Peaceful Handover. The battlefield cleanup continued until nearly midnight, when it was forced to halt due to the freezing night temperatures. 3 ironclad ships docked, and felt tents, specially issued for winter operations, were set up on the riverbank. The wreckage of the enemy's stranded sailboat was mercilessly dismantled to pieces, all used as heating fuel for the soldiers' outdoor camps. After completing the battlefield cleanup, the soldiers, following their superiors' instructions, were assigned to night watch and patrol teams. Those who were free gathered in groups around the warm campfires, taking out their issued cans and heating them by the fire, occasionally discussing in low voices the amusing incidents that had occurred during the day's battle. Wayne and his adjutant personally escorted the 2 prisoners into Commander Pierce's tent. Before Pierce could open his mouth to ask, one of them shouted in advance, "I am Baron Scott. Please allow me to meet with the Lord of Grizzly Fort. I demand the respect and treatment that a noble prisoner of war deserves." Another person also hurriedly said, "I am Hanson Brick, the second son of Baron Brick. Please allow me to meet with the chief officer of Grizzly Fort. We are willing to pay the ransom." Pierce frowned impatiently and responded coldly, "There is no Lord of Grizzly Fort here. I am the Supreme Commander." He paused and asked in a deep voice, "Why did Grand Duke Ralph send troops to Sancha Town? Was the Baron's detention of the slave caravan from Grizzly Fort under his direct instructions?" The 2 looked at each other in surprise. Baron Scott moved his shoulders with difficulty. "We are just noble knights who responded to the Lord's call to battle. The officer in charge is the Duke's nephew, but he has been killed, dead." Pierce raised his eyebrows in disappointment. "It seems that your commander is unlucky enough. Then you will answer the questions I asked just now. How many elite knights does the Grand Duke have in Fingaden City? How many spellcaster consultants does he have? What are the subsequent plans for Grizzly Castle? Just tell me as much as you know. I will naturally have a way to distinguish the truth from falsehood in your words." Baron Scott immediately shut his mouth after hearing this and turned his head to the side with an arrogant look, while the second son of Baron Brick hesitated for a moment. "Your Excellency the Commander, we are all full-time knights who have sworn allegiance to the Grand Duke. We will never do anything that violates the spirit of chivalry in our oath." "Oh," Pierce chuckled disapprovingly, "take them to the boat." After the soldiers took the 2 away, he ordered Wayne, "You have to work harder tonight and don't sleep. Use the methods I taught you to interrogate these 2 noble knights." Wayne rubbed his hands and said, "Are there no limits on methods? Do we want to keep them in exchange for ransom?" Pierce shook his head and said in a cold tone, "The Lord told me before we set out that we don't have to worry about prisoners or ransoms. You just need to extract enough information from them." To Pierce's surprise, the swift battle at the river mouth also attracted the attention of the Baron of Sancha Town. At dawn, soldiers patrolling outside the camp captured a group of spies who had come to investigate. After killing 2 who attempted to escape, the remaining 3 immediately fell off their horses and lay in the snow, begging for mercy. Then, soldiers trapped their legs and dragged them back to the riverbank camp. "Let you return to town and take a message back to the Baron of Sancha Town," Pierce ordered impatiently. "Tell the Baron to release our caravan immediately and abandon armed resistance. The fleet will arrive at the town dock this afternoon." He gestured to the pile of enemy corpses on the riverbank, ready for cremation, and added with a sinister grin, "Of course, if you still decide to engage us, I wouldn't mind burning a few more bodies." The scout stared in horror at the dead, draped in banners bearing the emblem of Grand Duke Ralph's family, piled haphazardly together. Most of the bodies were mutilated, as if they had been gnawed by some gigantic monster. Without waiting for Pierce to urge them on, they abandoned their horses and scrambled away towards the town. By mid-afternoon, when the armored icebreaker slowly approached the Sancha town dock, they found a group of ordinary soldiers in simple leather armor, surrounding a middle-aged man in elegant attire, waiting tremblingly outside the dock shed. My lord, the man in fine clothes seemed to have no sense of being a noble. Under the guidance of the informant, he quickly came to Pierce, threw himself on the ground and began to beg for mercy. "We didn't harm your caravan at all. We only detained them according to the instructions of His Excellency the Grand Duke. We even vacated 3 barns for them to shelter from the wind and rain, and cooked oatmeal porridge for them every day." Pierce was a little surprised and said, "Mr. Baron, don't tell me that we detained these people just to collect a sudden head tax." The man in fine clothes shook his head like a rattle and hurriedly distanced himself from the matter. "My lord, I am not a baron of Sancha town. I am just the new tax collector of the town. The baron, he escaped last night." As soon as these words came out, Pierce, who was ready to settle accounts with the local noble lords, was stunned on the spot and speechless for a long time. "Ran away? Or he ran away overnight?" The tax collector said with a bitter face, "Last night the baron's spies reported that your fleet was fighting with Duke Ralph at the river mouth. They said they saw the high-level spellcaster, who directly defeated the Duke's fleet." So, Wayne, standing aside, couldn't help but sneered and asked, "Then why didn't you run away, sir?" "I'm a local. I have long been dissatisfied with the baron's arbitrary taxation and withholding of passing caravans. The town doesn't even have a decent patrol team. The annual tax increases have caused the caravans to take a detour. The residents of the town have long lost their livelihoods, and they wish the baron would get out of here as soon as possible." Pierce asked a few more questions carefully and found that the other party's attitude did not seem false. Then he said slowly, "In that case, you don't have to be exploited and oppressed by Duke Ralph anymore. From now on, Sancha town is under the jurisdiction of Grizzly Lord. In 2 days, noble officials from Grizzly Castle will come to the town. You just need to complete the handover." Soon, the soldiers reported back that they had received the released secret police from the territory, as well as the hundreds of serfs he had purchased from the human traffickers. Although they had been held captive for a considerable period, the local officials, unwilling to offend Grizzly Castle, had not treated them harshly. In the freezing cold, with little food and clothing, only a few of the already sick serfs tragically died, while the rest, held captive in the barn, barely managed to survive. After arranging for the serfs to board the icebreaker, Pierce decided to depart immediately, without further delay. Grizzly Castle's vassal nobles would naturally send their men to take over the town's affairs, leaving only a small contingent of 100 Northern Army soldiers to maintain order. Before leaving, he glanced at the tax collector, who was humbly bowing to them at the dock, and a thought struck him. "This tax collector is a good manager. Take him with us and return to Grizzly Castle." Chapter 363, Already Prepared. On the day he returned to Grizzly Castle, Pierce reported to Harvey with the intelligence he'd gathered from the interrogation. "Sure enough, Duke Ralph hasn't responded to Grand Duke St. Valen's call," Harvey snorted. "The secretive army Mr. Illusion I discovered near Frostflower County clearly reveals their identity. Frostflower County is only a day's journey from Grizzly Castle. Why didn't they attack us while we were heading south to Sancha town?" Pierce was puzzled. Harvey shook his head. "Grizzly Castle is still a fortified city, after all. Even if they have high-level mages capable of flight, it would be difficult for them to capture a border town of nearly 10,000 people with just 2,000 men." Pierce nodded in understanding. "No wonder they've been holding the ground, recruiting mercenaries and abducting many locals for baggage carriers, abducting civilians, recruiting mercenaries." Harvey's heart skipped a beat, instantly grasping the enemy's purpose. "Grand Duke Ralph knows of my intention to expand the population. He plans to co-opt a large number of civilians from neighboring fiefdoms and directly attack Grizzly Castle." Harvey slapped his forehead, suddenly realizing. After all, in the eyes of such a noble, lowly civilians are the cheapest expendable commodities. Rather than having his elite knights directly participate in the battle, driving the people outside Grizzly Castle, enticing them to open the gates to receive them, and then forcing the chaotic crowd to launch a direct attack. If only mercenaries could be allowed to rush into the city among the refugees, Grizzly Castle would immediately erupt into uncontrollable civil unrest. What if we don't open the gates and leave them outside? Pierce felt the solution to the problem was simple. Harvey laughed. This is Duke Ralph's cunning plan. If I stay inside and allow those refugees to freeze to death outside the city, then my promise to recruit people from the south to migrate north will immediately become a shameless lie. Once his reputation and credibility as a feudal lord crumble among the common people, even if civil war breaks out, Harvey will likely struggle to absorb a large influx of migrants quickly. Desperate people would prefer to flee across the border to other countries. I can send in more soldiers from the frontier territory to prevent them from using the people to attack Grizzly Castle. Pierce frowned, pondering for a moment, and decided to send more troops in advance to prevent any potential trouble. Harvey stood up and patted Pierce on the shoulder. Our enemies have the same plan. After all, these people are living laborers. While Duke Ralph sees them as cannon fodder, Harvey sees them as valuable new population growth. To control the situation and safely accommodate the refugees, they naturally needed to mobilize troops from the main base. As long as the refugees continued to flood into Grizzly Fort, they would be able to force Harvey to send more troops there. This meant that the Wasteland base camp in the rear would gradually become depleted, and then it would be the turn of the elite troops hidden in the shadows, a mixture of spellcasters and bloodline knights, to take action. They planned to lure the tiger away from the mountain and directly attack our Wasteland territory. Pierce finally came to his senses, and he was so angry that his teeth itched. The noble's plan is really vicious. And the lives of civilians are no better than ants in their eyes. Harvey nodded. The battle in Sancha River will soon be reported back to Fingaven City, and Duke Ralph will know that we have iron ships and gunboats. Within a week at most, the special forces in Frostflower County will also know our combat methods and make responses and preparations in advance. Pierce clenched his fists and said hurriedly, "My lord, let me lead the troops of 2 battalions and rush directly to Frostflower County to wipe them out. If they let unarmed civilians stand in front of them, can you really harden your heart in order to open fire?" Pierce's face froze, and he hesitated for only a few seconds before saying decisively, "If it is a necessary sacrifice and price, I am willing to bear it. All right. Even if you're ruthless enough, that doesn't mean I'm willing to sacrifice these fresh populations." Harvey waved his hand to calm his commander, then slowly outlined his response strategy. Of course, Harvey would take all the people Grand Duke Ralph had abducted from the surrounding counties and towns, leaving no one behind. There was no reason to send his own troops to the south to gather people, even resorting to buying them from slave traders, only to reject those who offered themselves to him. As for the enemies luring the tiger away from the mountain, Harvey was completely apprehensive. Even in this world of supernatural power, the overwhelming advantage of hot weapons over cold weapons could not be overturned or altered by numbers, tactics, or strategies. 2,000 elite knights thought they were going to cross the Divine Spine Mountains to attack their own lair. Harvey couldn't help but sneer. The city defense cannons and rapid-fire magic rifles would teach them a lesson they would learn from themselves. The only concern was how many battle mages the enemy had deployed, and whether there were any high-level spellcasters. While a hereditary Grand Duke, as a mortal noble, was unlikely to attract the unwavering loyalty of such a rank, Harvey also had to be wary of the possibility of a surprise attack. Who knew if the venerable Ralph family would accidentally produce a noble spellcaster who opposed the Union? As the two men were conferring, Asdalon, freshly arrived at Grizzlyburg from the wasteland, knocked on the door and entered. "Sir, why not send Mr. Duncan directly, and his 2 students, 3 high-level mages? They'll be more than enough to handle any possible ambush." Before Asdalon could finish this suggestion, the Eye of Illusion emerged from the study doorway, smiling and bowing to Harvey. "Your Excellency. Pardon my interruption of your battle meeting without permission." Illusion Eye rubbed his hands and volunteered, "As long as we don't get besieged by a large group of bloodline knights, Madam Astrologer and I can easily take out their small group of spellcasters." Asdalon interrupted, "What if they were equipped with alchemical crossbows specifically designed to target high-level spellcasters? In my form, I can withstand 2 or 3 direct hits from them. Melissa also possesses some decent defensive equipment." Illusion Eye wasn't just a theoretical spellcaster, he had extensive combat experience. "What if their high-level spellcasters try to hold you back, allowing the bloodline knights to siege you?" Harvey joined in verbally torturing Illusion Eye. If the situation isn't favorable, we won't fight." Illusion Eye scratched his head. a look of embarrassment on his face. Pierce ruthlessly added a final blow. What if there's more than one high-level wizard hidden in the opposing team? The Eye of Illusion was now a little overwhelmed, and spread his hands and said in a dishonest manner, "What else can we do? Everyone is destined to die." Everyone immediately burst into laughter. Chapter 364 Human Traffickers. Although he had foreseen Duke Ralph's offensive intentions and understood that Grand Duke St. Valen and the Church hadn't completely forgotten Harvey, the Mage Lord hunkered down on the kingdom's borders. While responding to the Union's direct offensive, Harvey still felt a sense of inexplicable anxiety about the current situation. He was well aware that the conflict of faith, originally sparked by the Church and the Union, had gradually devolved into a different direction due to the interference of secular nobles. As a pioneer lord without even a noble title, he was no longer as weak as when he first moved to the wasteland, and needed to diligently conceal himself and develop secretly. Even if his own individual strength had not yet reached a high level, the cards Harvey held were enough to intimidate the surrounding fiefdom lords with ulterior motives, while also allowing him to openly side with the Union and compete with the Church and the nobles. Harvey stayed briefly in Grizzly Castle for 2 days, waiting for the official transfer of management of Sancher Town to his vassal nobles before returning to the wasteland. Arriving almost immediately, the Andrew Chamber of Commerce team arrived. "Your Excellency, we meet again." President Andrew, a muscular man with a thick beard, bowed eagerly to Harvey. "Forgive me for not informing you of my visit." Harvey smiled unfazed. "As close business partners, my wasteland territory is always open to you. You can come anytime." He paused, then asked, somewhat puzzled, "The order for magic stone power generators you placed was delivered 2 weeks ago. Is there some quality issue?" President Andrew rubbed his hands and shook his head a little awkwardly. No. The alchemical equipment is in perfect working order, and the repair technicians who came with it are highly skilled. There's absolutely no problem. It's just, my men overheard in Port Montenegro that you are sending people to buy serfs," President Andrew explained carefully. "We occasionally dabble in that business, so we wanted to see if we could be of any assistance to you, Your Excellency." While slavery and human trafficking have long been strictly prohibited in the southern kingdoms, many aristocratic families and guilds with deep connections have made their fortunes from it. While publicly no longer engaging in this shady business, they secretly cling to this lucrative profit. They've simply shifted their targets to capturing already displaced mixed-race individuals, or abducting innocent civilians from war-torn lands. Furthermore, many tenant farmers and serfs, burdened by the arbitrary taxation and forced labor of the landed nobles, fall into the hands of these traffickers and are subsequently sold to other lands. Harvey wasn't surprised to learn that a major mine owner was secretly involved in the shady business of human trafficking. After all, before the widespread adoption of magic stone power machines, almost all mines relied entirely on manual labor for mining and transportation. Harvey didn't want to discuss this somewhat sensitive topic with him in depth right away. "No need to rush. It's lunchtime now. Why don't we go back to the castle and have lunch first?" Andrew immediately put on a smile and flattered him. "I enjoyed an extraordinary feast of delicious food when I visited your territory last time. Now that you mention it again, my stomach starts to growl. Most of the time when I go out for business in winter, I can only eat wheat cakes and pickled meat. They are cold and hard, and I can hardly swallow them. In this era, the food preservation technology seems to have no other reliable way except to pickle it with a lethal amount of salt. If dry food wants to be stored for a longer time, you have to do everything possible to remove the moisture in it and have to bake it dry and hard. It can even serve as a self-defense weapon during the journey. It is no problem to throw it out and knock people unconscious. Unfortunately, the cannery in his territory currently has low production, mainly because the tin plate used to make containers cannot be produced in large quantities. There is no direct source of tin ore in the wilderness, which is the most important tin ore in tin-plated iron alloys. Harvey has to rely on importing in bulk from the south, resulting in the canned food produced being barely enough to supply the army. After having lunch in a relaxed and happy atmosphere, President Andrew patted his stomach with satisfaction, raised his glass again and saluted Harvey. "In such a snowy winter, I can't believe that I can still taste such fresh glacial salmon and pine mushrooms. The thick soup made from them almost made me swallow my tongue into my stomach. And this honey omelette, God! How do you let the bees make delicious honey in winter?" Harvey laughed and said casually, "Although the glacial salmon hide under the thick ice in winter, it is not difficult to catch them. As for the bees," he I just built a botanical garden for them with flowers blooming all year round. Those prominent princes and nobles don't know how to enjoy life as well as you." Andrew drank the vodka in the glass and sprayed out a strong breath of alcohol. "My lord, the human trade I mentioned earlier." Harvey put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and said calmly, "Yes, I am indeed actively buying people right now." "How many serfs does President Andrew have for sale, if they are young and strong laborers?" "This many." Andrew raised his left hand and held up 3 fingers. 3,000? Young and strong. Harvey shook his head. "Too few. How much are you willing to sell them for?" Andrew was a little surprised. 3,000 is not enough? The situation in the central part of the southern border is currently tense. Food prices are skyrocketing in various countries. The trafficked serfs are simply unable to be sold within their own countries. Without the great effort of transporting them to the southern coast, there is no profit at all. "So, how many do you need?" Andrew waited for Harvey to indicate a number to see if he could take it all. Who knew that after a long while, Harvey didn't even raise his hand, but instead heard a sentence that almost made him think he was drunk and hallucinating. "I need as many people as you can gather." "There is no upper limit." Andrew smiled bitterly and said, "Sir, don't joke with me. If I can really get tens of thousands of young and strong laborers, equip them with weapons and armor, wouldn't I be able to satisfy the desire to be a great lord? Where can I get so much food to feed them? It doesn't have to be all young and strong. I also want women, the elderly and children," Harvey explained patiently. "If you can't do it alone, then join forces with other human traffickers, but the price must be low enough. I believe you also know that once the full-scale war breaks out, these serfs will become less and less valuable," Andrew worriedly said. "But even if we get so many people, we can't deliver them to you in large numbers. It's winter now. If these people travel thousands of miles north to the wilderness, I'm afraid more than half of them will freeze to death on the way." "Don't worry about that." Harvey had already prepared a plan. "You just need to use the fleet to send them to Sancho Town on the Ralph River, and then the fleet I arranged will be responsible for the transportation. We will hand over the people and the money in Sancho Town." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 Deterrence Action. After President Andrew's caravan departed, Harvey sat in his study and sighed deeply. Reiner sat nearby, clutching a financial manual. Although the alchemically forged metal skull was expressionless, the guards guarding the door gave the impression that both the Lord and the Grand Steward wore gloomy expressions. "The money we've so hard earned in the treasury is about to be depleted again." Before winter, the merchandise trade contracts signed with several southern guilds had earned Harvey tens of thousands of gold pounds. This didn't include the long-term pharmaceutical franchise agreement with the Dragonstone Guild. The potion business, after all, requires time and publicity to build reputation. While the short-term results might not be significant, the long-term profits from sales are substantial. However, Harvey's plans for territory development clearly outweighed the benefits. The construction of the Institute of Magical Sciences and the procurement of its various facilities and equipment, along with the promise of an endless supply of experimental materials for spellcasters, consumed nearly half of the Pioneer Territory's annual revenue. "I hope the only 20,000 gold pounds left in the treasury will be enough to support our rapid population expansion plan in the short term." Then, Harvey summoned Pearson Asdalen, who had returned from Grizzly Castle. "I want to use special means to intimidate Duke Ralph," he said directly. "We can't sit idly by and watch him plunder and torture the people of the surrounding fiefdoms in order to target us. This is tantamount to consuming our future manpower in disguise," Pierce said in a deep voice. "If we don't use force to subdue them, it will be difficult to change the enemy's strategy. I think the safest way is to wipe out the secret army sent by the other side as soon as possible." Harvey shook his head slowly and said, "That attacking force infiltrated with spellcasters must be eliminated, but it won't change the current situation much. In order to dispel Duke Ralph's idea of targeting him, unless St. Valen and the Church Coalition forces were completely defeated by the Federation, Archduke St. Valen, as the initiator of the war, would be liquidated, and his number one supporter, Duke Ralph, would naturally stop." Besides this, Harvey also thought of a feasible solution. The first was to speed up the migration and absorption of the surrounding population. making it impossible for the enemy to plunder enough people to attack the southern border areas that Harvey actually controlled. The second was to make the enemy realize that using the lives of innocent civilians to fight a protracted war of attrition would inevitably backfire. If they insisted on going their own way, Harvey would make it impossible for them to live in peace even in their base in Fingagon City. Are you planning to repeat the trick you used against a previous Earl Fagin, send someone to infiltrate Fingagon City and assassinate Archduke Ralph? As Dallin reacted very quickly and immediately understood Harvey's idea. That's right, this is equivalent to a warning, but it's not a warning issued directly to the other party in my name, but in the name of the people. Harvey paused, and said confidently, because Grand Duke Ralph took the initiative to provoke disputes between domestic fiefdom lords, resulting in wars and chaos in the border areas, the people are living in dire straits. A powerful blood warrior who has been living in seclusion here, or a righteous local spellcaster, decided to resist his brutal rule and launched a heroic action to assassinate the Grand Duke. Pierce opened his mouth wide, stunned for a long time, not knowing what to say. Sir, if you decide to do so, I am willing to go to Fingagon City in person and swear to complete this task of assassinating the Grand Duke. What are you thinking? I don't intend to let you die, Harvey said speechlessly. Grand Duke Ralph really has high-level spellcasters under his command. No matter who I send, there will be no chance to actually complete this plan. As Dallin suddenly understood and smiled. So, you're just trying to frighten the Duke, so he'll be wary and curb his brutal tactics, while the chances of directly assassinating a Duke in his own lair were slim. A subtle attempt to frighten him wasn't difficult. As long as it served as a deterrent, it would be considered a success. Pierce finally understood and turned to his guards. Go, fetch Captain Wayne. Wayne, rushing from the barracks to the castle, noticed that two high-ranking mages, the Eye of Illusion and the Astrologer, had also arrived. He immediately realized something was amiss. Wayne, I remember. You performed very well on the assassination mission at Grizzly Castle. Harvey waved at him with a smile, offering a few casual compliments. Wayne immediately puffed out his chest proudly and replied with a resolute expression, My lord, I will not fail in this mission to assassinate the Duke. If I don't succeed, I will. Pierce frowned, stepped forward to silence his rambling, and scolded him, Shut up. Stop your nonsense. Harvey gestured to the Eye of Illusion and the Astrologer nearby and explained, Wayne will complete this mission with my two spellcasting advisors. A guard then approached, carrying a long wooden weapon case, which Harvey opened in front of everyone. It was a three-part, split-piece magic rifle. It was larger than the one Wayne had used to assassinate Master Burko Conrad, with a longer barrel and a new set of sights. Wayne obtained Harvey's permission and eagerly assembled the rifle, deftly assembling it. The slender barrel, nearly 60 feet long, made it impossible for him to aim steadily while standing or crouching, so he could only awkwardly rest the rifle on the desk. Harvey pulled a metal bracket from the bottom of the weapon box and said with a smile, To ensure shooting stability, a special gun bracket must be used. The Eye of Illusion was somewhat puzzled and asked, My lord, since we are going together, why bother using a magic gun? Can't we find an opportunity to sneak into the Duke's residence in Fingagon City and attack directly with high-level spells? Too dangerous? Harvey shook his head. Entering the city to attack, whether successful or not, it will be difficult for you to escape. The Duke has a large number of high-level spellcasters and bloodline warriors under his command. Under siege, you are tantamount to committing suicide. He pointed to the magic rifle Wayne was fiddling with. This special long-range sniper rifle can fire magic ammunition from 2 kilometers away. If you find the right time, you don't even need to enter Fingagon City. You can hide in a hidden place outside the city and complete the sniper mission. What? 2 kilometers away? Everyone present opened their mouths in surprise, stunned in disbelief. As far as a magic cannon, Pierce stuttered. Wayne, bewildered, clutched the spear, muttering to himself, I'm holding a magic-powered cannon. Wow. If it can really fire that far, wouldn't it be able to silently kill the high-ranking wizard guarding the Duke? The Eye of Illusion felt a layer of cold sweat on its back, suddenly feeling an inexplicable fear of the weapon before it, as if it too was being secretly targeted. The Lady Astrologer was much calmer and took the initiative to ask, My lord, if that's the case, why do you need the two of us to cooperate with you? If an ordinary soldier can also manipulate this artifact and easily kill a high-level spellcaster, then assassinating the Duke doesn't seem to be difficult, right? Harvey waved his hand to calm everyone down, and slowly explained, it's not as scary and exaggerated as you think. The extremely long shooting distance also brings about a decrease in power. Not to mention high-level spellcasters, even ordinary low-level defensive magic weapons are difficult to break. As soon as he finished speaking, the two high-level mages breathed a sigh of relief. Similarly, hitting the target requires precise aiming. A set of customized alchemical sights and a sharpshooter skilled in long-range shooting are both indispensable, as Dallin added at the right moment, and each shot requires a high-level spellcaster to infuse all of their magic power into the special bullet. Ordinary magic bullets are not a match for this sniper rifle. The Eye of Illusion and the astrologer were stunned for a moment, finally understanding why Harvey wanted them to cooperate with Wayne to complete the mission. It turned out that he regarded them as mobile, powerful magic bullets. Harvey patted the trembling Wayne and encouraged him. Do you understand? These two high-level wizards are your two special bullets, which means you only have 2 chances to shoot. I'll give you 3 days to familiarize yourself with and practice how to master this super sniper rifle in advance. Chapter 366, Magic Barret. The sniper training was held in a dense forest outside the city walls. The chaotic gravel and grassy slopes and sturdy, untidy trees simulated a relatively complex shooting environment while also ensuring a cleared area to prevent accidental casualties. Harvey personally led the group to observe the training. In addition to the sniper rifle currently used by Wayne, he had Chris's lab rush an additional spare kit overnight. This was also a 3-section sniper rifle, equipped with a new set of magic sights. During the training preparations, Chris began to talk non-stop about the powerful sniper rifle that Harvey named Barret. The 2,000-meter shooting range is the measured average distance. If you ignore the accuracy of the hit, it can actually hit farther. As he spoke, he picked up the split side and carefully disassembled the lens to reveal the tiny magic runes engraved inside. This set of sights is an alchemical artifact that solidifies the Eye of Reconnaissance spell. The casting model has been specially improved and adjusted, allowing the operator to share the line of sight with it, accurately observing targets thousands of meters away. Guard Captain Tommy muttered softly, "My bloodline talent can do the same." "Alice, the Lord did not assign me to complete this task." Vaughn quietly kicked Tommy's butt from behind and scolded him in a deep voice. "As the Lord's personal guard, what could be more important than protecting the Lord's safety? Besides, in terms of patience and observation, how can you compare to Wayne? Isn't he always the one who beats us in shooting competitions?" Tommy scratched his head awkwardly, finally shutting up in the face of the ironclad truth. Harvey spent only half an hour helping Wayne adjust to his usual shooting stance, forcing him to crouch flat on the ground, with a long, thick Barret rifle directly in front of him, his monocular close to the alchemical scope's barrel. This shooting drill consisted of a 1,500-meter medium range and a 2,500-meter long-range targeting, each aimed at 2 predetermined sniper positions. The Dragonstone Merchant's warehouse staff in Fingigan City had delivered a detailed map of the city, precisely marking the areas where Grand Duke Ralph frequently frequented. The Duke's residence, nestled on a semi-elevated slope west of the city, was naturally where he spent most of his time. It was also the most heavily guarded and difficult to find a sniper angle, so Harvey simply abandoned it. Another location was the military base in the southern corner of Fingigan City. The terrain was open and flat. If the Duke showed up there, a sniper attack from a hilltop just outside the city, directly opposite the military camp, would be ideal. While the long range might reduce the chance of a hit, it was a perfect ambush location, also facilitating a quick evacuation. The final location was discovered by a detail Harvey had stumbled upon in the intelligence sent by the Dragonstone Merchant Guild. Duke Ralph's family used the Frostwing Eagle as their emblem. This bird of prey, native to the central Southland, had been specially domesticated and raised by the Duke's family for years, allowing them to transmit messages without the need for spellcasters and intercept carrier pigeons released by rivals and enemies. The current Duke Ralph himself was particularly fond of taming Frostwing Eagles, even having built a towering hawkhouse within Fingigan City. He would regularly visit the hawkhouse and play with the 2 Frostwing Eagles he had personally raised from the tower. Harvey described this as a perfect target. However, if they wanted to target Duke Ralph from this tower in the heart of Fingigan City, the ambush site outside the city was relatively far away, requiring them to move their firing position further inland. Therefore, after consulting with the others, Harvey ultimately chose a long-abandoned section of Fingigan City's inner city wall. When the shooting training officially began, Wayne prioritized a long-range position on a 2,500-meter slope. Following the shooting position Harvey had taught him, He crouched on the ground, set up his Barrett rifle before him, and carefully placed his monocular close to the alchemical scope. "How is it going? Can you see the target?" The Eye of Illusion half crouched behind Wayne. As a participant in the mission, he and the astrologer naturally had to practice with a sniper to improve their coordination. As Wayne approached the scope, his vision was instantly drawn inwards in a dizzying trance, as if something were tugging at his eyeballs, dragging him around at angles and speeds unfathomable to the average person. He frowned and broke away from the anchor's observation. His face pale, his lips trembling for a moment before he finally managed to suppress a vomiting sound, causing the nearby Eye of Illusion to shake his head in disgust. "Fool! Don't connect directly with a reconnaissance eye with your naked eyes. Learn to focus your mental energy and use your magic to stabilize your observation field of view." The astrologer rolled his eyes and said dully, "Mr. Sniper is not a spellcaster. Are you crazy?" The Eye of Illusion then remembered that his mission partner was only a bloodline warrior and awkwardly added, "Then what can we do? Without magic, it will be very difficult to fully control and adapt to the reconnaissance eye. The dizzying feeling of high-speed movement would make even the toughest man cough up bile." Wayne crouched aside and vomited for a while, then wiped his mouth nonchalantly, crouched down in front of the Barrett, and without hesitation, put his eyes close to the magic sight again. About 10 minutes later, Wayne, pale and drenched in cold sweat, took the initiative to speak. "Mr. Eye of Illusion, Ms. Astrologer, I see the target." Harvey had asked the two high-level mages to cooperate with Wayne in this deterrent mission. First, he needed to utilize the ultra-high mobility gained by casting the flight spell to ensure that the sniper could quickly and safely disengage and return after the mission was completed. Secondly, of course, the special magic bullet used by the Barrett magic sniper rifle could not be mass-produced in a laboratory. To activate and release such a magic bullet at an extremely long distance, it must be infused with a sufficient amount of liquid magic energy. However, this also prevented the caliber of the ammunition from being reduced, ultimately maintaining the size of a small magic-powered cannonball. But this obviously couldn't be stuffed into a magic gun. Harvey finally figured out a solution to this problem. Since he couldn't create a bullet of the right caliber, he could create blank bullets that could hold magic energy. Then, he could have a high-level spellcaster capable of compressing magic energy, imbue the blanks with magic energy on the spot. As long as the bullet, inscribed with a stability rune, was fired within a short time frame, the high concentration of compressed magic energy wouldn't destroy its internal structure and cause a magic explosion. That's why Harvey jokingly called the Eye of Illusion and the astrologer the living sniper ammunition carried by Wayne, the sniper. Chapter 367 Lure the snake out of its hole. A week passed quickly, and the sniper team responsible for this deterrent operation departed from the frontier territory. The Dragonstone Merchant Guild clerk stationed in Jackdaw Town received instructions from the guild master early in the morning and prepared all the necessary identification for the three men's disguises. They then boarded the guild's ordinary brigantine from Grizzly Castle and headed south. Upon arriving in Sancha Town, they boarded another local cargo ship and sailed west along the Sancha River towards Fingigan City. Although operating in conjunction with two high-level spellcasters, Harvey, for the first time, appointed Wayne as the leader of this mission, demanding the full cooperation of the two battle mages. This made Wayne feel uneasy throughout the journey. Although the Lord had always treated them with kindness, he was, after all, his bloodline lord, a level of closeness far beyond anyone else's reach. Now, facing Mr. Illusion Eye and Ms. Astrologer alone, he felt the pressure of confronting transcendental superiors. "Mr. Eye of Illusion, do you think we should ambush outside the city, attempt a ranged attack on Duke Ralph, or enter directly and attempt a surprise attack within the inner city?" Standing side by side on the ship approaching Fingigan City's docks, Eye of Illusion and Wayne quietly discussed the details of their operation. "Well, Astrologer and I will follow your lead on this operation. What are your thoughts?" Eye of Illusion replied with a gentle and casual tone, devoid of the arrogance of a high-level spellcaster. "If the operation fails due to your judgment and command, we'll consider subsequent remedial measures, haha, but I believe your experience won't require us to take action." Hearing the other party's clear statement of no arbitrary intervention, Wayne felt reassured and quickly said, "In that case, I suggest entering the city directly. Rather than trying to wait for the Duke to appear in the barracks, I think a surprise attack while he's in the Eagle Room is more likely to succeed. Rather than taking a chance, it's better to wait and see." "It's indeed a wise choice." Lady Astrologer had suddenly appeared on the bow deck, smiling and agreeing. The two exchanged glances and laughed. But if we enter the city, we'll need to split up and find a chance to reunite. After Grand Duke St. Valen's falling out with the Union branch within Fingigan City had long been expelled and eradicated. Other spellcasting organizations that hadn't explicitly pledged allegiance to the church also withdrew, seeing the situation as dire. Entering the city openly as independent spellcasters would inevitably attract the attention and surveillance of the church and the authorities. Furthermore, the high-level spellcasters serving Duke Ralph would undoubtedly have numerous surveillance systems in place. If the two brazenly followed the caravan into the city, their identities would likely be exposed, leading to covert harassment. The powerful magical fluctuations wielded by high-level spellcasters shone brighter than the morning star in the night sky to their peers. Don't worry, follow the caravan into the city. We'll naturally be able to mask the magical fluctuations and sneak into Fingigan City under cover of darkness, the astrologer assured Wayne confidently. Wayne nodded. In that case, we will split up. After entering the city today, I will go to the inner city wall at night to look for a suitable sniping location. After confirmation, I will leave a mark at the caravan tavern. You just need to follow the mark and meet me at the agreed location. After the discussion, the Eye of Illusion and the astrologer took advantage of the sudden fog on the river in the early morning, cast a spell, soared into the air, and rushed towards the mountains outside the city in the direction of Fingigan City. Wayne, who was left alone at the bow of the boat, stood on tiptoe and looked in the direction they were going for a moment, muttering in a low voice with envy. The spellcaster's methods are really magical. He can soar freely in the sky like a bird. If only I could have the chance to try the feeling of flying, but right now, of course, the most important thing is to complete the Lord's task first. The cargo ship soon arrived at the Fingigan City docks. Wayne, blending in with the caravan, obediently queued up to enter the city. He faced repeated harassment from the city guards and patrols, and was forced to pay both the entrance tax and the head tax twice. The caravan leader then secretly gave the tax collector at the gate a generous tip, allowing him to enter Fingigan City without issue. These nobles and the city guards are so corrupt, Wayne cursed inwardly. If it were his home in the frontier territory, any city official or city guard who dared to block the city gates and extort money from the people and caravans would likely be handcuffed and taken away for tea by the police and the city hall's anti-corruption officers before they could even warm their pockets. Such corrupt behavior would ultimately result in the loss of his well-paid, stable job and a minimum of 10 years of hard labor in a logging camp or mine. After following the Chamber of Commerce convoy to the post station, Wayne quietly left through the station's back door, protected by the caravan attendants. When he reappeared on the city streets, he had changed into ordinary local attire, carrying a gun pouch disguised as a cargo package. Following the Chamber of Commerce's contact's instructions, he quickly navigated through several unfamiliar neighborhoods until he found a cheap hotel run by the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce in Fingigan City, catering to out-of-town merchants. Using his pre-prepared identification, he secured a second-floor room facing the street. This scene, it feels like a few years ago, when I was ordered by the Lord to go on a mission to Grizzly Castle. Even the hotel looks pretty much the same. Alone in his room, Wayne visibly relaxed. He carefully slid his gun pouch under the bed and leaned against the window, gazing out at the street. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed from the room. Looks like Mr. Wayne has been on this secret mission before. Wayne reacted swiftly, his left hand pulling out a hidden alchemical dagger from his waist. Almost instantly, the blade erupted in flames, and with incredible swiftness, he lunged towards the corner of the closet where the voice had come from. A pure black nightcat nimbly dodged his attack, leaping onto the bed in a startled voice, mumbling incoherently, "Hey, hey, hey. Calm down. It's me. The Eye of Illusion." What eye? Wayne's attack missed, and he froze in shock. Only then did he realize how familiar the voice was. It was Mr. Eye of Illusion. He could actually transform into a black cat. "Oh, you really scared me." Wayne shook off the sparks from his dagger and sheathed the weapon awkwardly. The black cat paced back and forth on the bed on tiptoe. "Didn't I tell you that we have a way to sneak into the city? I turned into a wild cat and followed you all the way here." Wayne nodded, walked around the room twice, pointed at a black spider with long legs in the corner, and said politely, "Then this should be the astrologer lady, right?" After the black cat was stunned for a moment, it suddenly burst into violent laughter and rolled around on the bed. "Ha ha ha. Mr. Wayne, you are so humorous. There is no one else in this room except the two of us." He paused, and his pair of round and shiny cat eyes blinked in a very anthropomorphic way, and whispered, "Ms. Astrologer sneaked into the Eagle Room. Since we have decided to snipe the Duke there, let's not passively wait for him to show up. Ms. Astrologer is going to the Eagle Room to make trouble, and then take the initiative to lure Duke Ralph." Wayne's heart skipped a beat, thinking that the feasibility was not high, but a strange spellcaster with an obviously unidentified identity appearing in the Eagle Room will alert the other party. Maybe it will alert the Duke to hide in the mansion and never show up again. The black cat jumped gracefully from the bed to the window, smiled faintly. "Don't worry, it won't alert the other party. The astrologer will sneak in without anyone noticing, and then kill and cripple the Duke's beloved frost-winged eagles. I believe that the Grand Duke who loves eagles like his life will come in person to punish the subordinates in the Eagle Room who are not doing their job well." Chapter 368 I'm here. Fingin City, with a history spanning over a century, originally lacked the sprawling scale it currently possesses. However, with the rise of the founding Duke Ralph family, the city's status and development soared. With a permanent population exceeding 10,000, the city was already overcrowded. Furthermore, the Ralph family acquired valuable land within the inner city to manage their private property. Local residents, left with no place to live, gradually migrated outward. The inner wall, originally used for defensive purposes, eroded over time and ultimately fell into disuse. The bricks were dismantled by civilians and taken back to their homes on horse-drawn carts to repair their homes. The location Wayne chose as a sniper spot was a relatively sturdy sentry tower on the inner wall. There were dozens of such structures within Fingin City, but most were severely damaged, with even the roofs and staircases rotting. Furthermore, the dampness caused by the sinking of the foundations over time made it infested with snakes, insects, rats, and ants. Even the local homeless refused to seek shelter there. This abandoned tower faces the Eagle House in the center of the city. No one usually comes here on weekdays, so I think it's perfect. Wayne, taking advantage of the night, reached the edge of the city wall, gazing at the abandoned building towering overhead. A black cat with shimmering dark green eyes and exceptionally smooth fur crouched at his feet. The cat spoke in the voice of a young man. "Yes, it's a hidden spot indeed. I can't use flight magic freely within the city, so you'll have to climb up yourself," the black cat said with a smile. It then nimbly leaped onto the raised stone bricks and bounded up the tower. Wayne chuckled bitterly, stooped, removed his leather boots, and slung them around his neck. He clasped his hands between the cracks in the stone bricks, and using the strong, agile physique of a bloodline warrior, he climbed swiftly and silently. When will the astrologer rejoin us? Or, will she retreat after completing her mission to lure the Duke to the Eagle House? Black Cat crouched on the parapet atop the tower and stretched. "Don't worry. First, observe and determine Duke Ralph's likely location and when to strike." Wayne nodded, removing his Barrett rifle from his pouch and quickly assembling it. He took a deep breath and brought his eyes to the alchemical scope. Fighting back a wave of nausea, his gaze quickly zoomed in on the Eagle House tower 1,000 meters away. As the intelligence had predicted, the towering Eagle House stood out among the low-rise buildings of Fingin City. Constructed of massive, pure white stone blocks, and excluding the Crimson Gate at its base, it stood roughly 3 or 4 stories tall, rivaling the size of a costly wizard's tower. Each floor of the Hawk House boasted several open windows, and a massive iron frame was erected on the rooftop terrace, where the tamed frost-winged hawks rested. Wayne was observing carefully, rapidly calculating his target's likely location and timing his strike, when he suddenly heard a strange sound of bones rubbing and twisting. He quickly turned to see Mr. Illusion Eye's transformed black cat, swelled under the cover of night, and finally returned to its original form, clad in wizard robes. "Don't mind me, it's just time for the illusion spell." The Eye of Illusion shook his robes, leaned in, and pointed in the direction of the Eagle Room. "What do you think? Do you plan to strike the Duke as he emerges from the ground, or wait until he ascends to the Eagle Room?" Wayne was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "Let me think about it. I have to make sure everything is perfect. I only have 2 chances, and there's a strong chance they won't give me a second shot if I miss the first." The moonlight outside the tower suddenly grew brighter, filtering through the parapets onto the abandoned rooftop. A warm, cold female voice, echoing through the moonlight, instantly reached Wayne's ears. "Mr. Wayne, with all due respect, you're not planning to follow Lord Harvey's orders, merely to intimidate Duke Ralph, are you?" The astrologer, having arrived at the tower at some point, spoke softly. Reflecting Wayne's thoughts? Exactly. He certainly had no intention of letting the Duke off lightly. Armed with powerful magical weapons personally developed by the Lord, having traveled 1,000 miles to infiltrate the enemy's lair, and with the full support of 2 high-ranking mages, this opportunity was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Wayne. A successful assassination would completely eliminate Lord Harvey's current and greatest threat, a temptation too great for Wayne. As for the possibility of simultaneously saving countless innocent people from the surrounding counties and towns who had been forcibly conscripted and looted, Wayne hadn't given it much thought. According to the Lord, this was a classic case of a lack of ideological awareness, a pure example of blind loyalty and warmongering. Now that we're here, Wayne muttered to himself, you two won't try to stop me, will you? If the Lord holds me accountable, I'll take full responsibility. The Eye of Illusion and the astrologer exchanged glances, then chuckled, of course not. I admire your decisiveness and ruthlessness. Now, what cooperation do you need from us? Simply luring Duke Ralph to the hawk shed isn't enough. We need to find a way to get him to the top floor, ideally on the terrace. Wayne already had a rough idea and plan in mind. The astrologer paused for a moment, then said, there aren't any spellcasters among the permanent guards in the hawk shed. I've already managed to inoculate the Frostwing Hawks with parasitic spells. In other words, without anyone noticing any abnormalities in the trained hawks' bodies, the astrologer could precisely control the moment of their sudden death. The 3 of them immediately began discussing the detailed implementation plan. Every morning, the guards and falconers in the hawk house would release some of the mature Frostwing Hawks, allowing them to roam freely over Fingigan City for a period of time. They would then use hawk whistles and fresh meat to lure them back to their nests. As for those newly captured and untamed Frostwings, they would be blindfolded and shackled and kept in the hawk house for a period of time to be tamed. If they were released without warning, they would likely disappear forever. This would provide the astrologers with a perfect opportunity to operate. They would first trigger the parasitic seeds in the remaining Frostwing Hawks in the hawk house, causing them to suddenly die or be seriously injured. Regardless of whether the falconers could rescue them in time, they would immediately report the situation to Duke Ralph. Once the Duke arrives in person and discovers the widespread casualties among the falconers, he'll undoubtedly order his men to recall the Frostwing Hawks released at morning. Then, the astrologer will repeat the process, guiding the falcon-loving Duke to the top of the tower. The Eagle Room atop the tower is a circular platform, narrow enough to barely accommodate a handful of people, and situated at a high point with no shelter. So, next, naturally, it's time for Elite Sniper Wayne to come into play. Chapter 369 Accidental Failure. In the early morning hours, the slumbering Fingigan City slowly awoke to the echoing of church bells. Wayne crouched atop an abandoned tower on the city wall, periodically peering through his alchemical scope toward the hawk house, constantly adjusting his aim to maintain his shooting control. Soon, he saw the falconers gradually opening the iron shutters of the hawk house's tower window. Several massive birds of prey flapped their wings and soared into the sky, circling the hawk house. Almost done, let's do it. The astrologer, who had been quietly leaning against a corner of the tower, pulled a shimmering crystal ball from her bosom. She gently opened and closed her mouth, muttering a silent incantation, and then snapped her fingers. About 5 minutes later, Wayne noticed a hawk house window slam shut. Through the sills, he could vaguely see someone inside, busy running up and down. Soon, the ground floor door opened, and someone hurriedly mounted their horse and headed for the Duke's palace. The plan went smoothly. Less than an hour later, Duke Ralph's luxurious carriage arrived at the hawking shed at full speed. The tall, middle-aged man in elegant attire who hurried out of the carriage was undoubtedly Duke Ralph himself. The Duke appeared to truly love hawks. Through the alchemical scope, Wayne could clearly see his half-exposed profile, a sullen expression tinged with anger, like a volcano about to erupt. The officials guarding the hawking shed knelt. In his rage, the Duke grabbed a pale falconer, turned the hilt of his sword, and struck him hard on the head. Then, he ripped the whistle from his neck and began to blow. The frost-winged hawks circling near the hawking shed immediately heard their owner's call and responded with shrill, piercing cries. 2 of the largest frost-winged hawks folded their wings side by side and swooped down towards the Duke on the ground, 2 of the hawks the Duke had personally trained. Wayne immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Madam Astrologer, please cast the spell immediately." Before he could finish his words, he watched through his scope as the 2 frostwing hawks, originally swiftly flying toward the Duke, suddenly shuddered violently in their dive. One of them lurched uncontrollably and crashed into the outer wall of the Hawk House Tower, its brains splattering and leaving a deep red blood stain on the brickwork. The other, with a shrill cry, dived and struggled, plunging headfirst into the hard ground. Less than 10 meters from Duke Ralph, it collapsed into a pool of mud, shattered bones and tendons. This clearly terrified Duke Ralph. He quickly put away his hawk whistle and rushed into the Hawk House, quickly reappearing on the tower's rooftop platform. He clearly didn't dare to summon the Frostwing Hawks still circling overhead. He planned to have his falconer bring fresh meat to the rooftop to slowly lure the released hawks back. At this moment, only Duke Ralph himself and the 3 falconers responsible for carrying food for the Frostwing Falcons remained on the top floor of the Eagle Room. The guards who had originally surrounded the Duke were all left outside the Eagle Room. A golden opportunity. The bullets, imbued and charged by Mr. Eye of Illusion, were already loaded into the magazine, and Ms. Astrologer was compressing the magic power for the second bullet. Backlight, wind direction, westward, weak, target distance, approximately 900 meters, Wayne muttered to himself. His finger firmly on the metal trigger of the Barrett. 2 straight, intersecting lines were engraved on the mirror of the alchemical sight. Wayne knew clearly that the center of the intersection of the lines was the impact point of the bullet. In the absence of wind or weak wind, at a distance of less than 1,000 meters, he had a 90% chance of hitting the head of a stationary target. But Duke Ralph was no human target, standing still. He paced back and forth on the top platform of the Eagle Tower, sometimes shouting to the sky, sometimes gesticulating and directing his falconer to pick up bloody fresh meat and wave it around, attracting the circling frost-winged hawks closer. Wayne remained calm. His body, as if frozen, lay on the ground, his hands firmly on the gun, his finger loose on the trigger, quietly waiting for the perfect moment. Finally, Duke Ralph paused briefly, seemingly frustrated that the food lure wasn't working. Furious, he put his hands on his hips and began to scold his falconer. What a chance! I finally got it. Wayne pulled the trigger without hesitation. The runes engraved on the thick gun instantly illuminated. A low humming sound was followed by a subtle wave of magical energy. Wayne's eyes didn't leave the scope. He didn't see the exact impact, nor did he expect the bloody spray of a shattered head. The target simply shuddered, as if shaken by something, and fell flat on his face beside the metal frame where the Frostwing Falcon was perched. The falconers nearby were also stunned, rushing over to try to lift the fallen Duke to his feet. The Eye of Illusion anxiously leaned in and asked, "Did you hit it? Did you hit it? How could this happen?" Wayne was puzzled, but without the slightest panic, he raised his hand, took the second magic-infused bullet from the astrologer, and quickly loaded it into the magazine. Buzz! Another magical bullet was fired instantly, this time at a less perfect angle than the previous one. Wayne could only hope that the moment Duke Ralph struggled to his feet, surrounded by 3 falconers, he would find an opening for a perfect hit. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. A thick, bloody mist suddenly rose from the top platform of the Eagle Shed. A hapless falconer, caught on the chaos by Wayne's bullet, had his head and upper body exploded, blood mixed with tiny pieces of brain matter and flesh spraying all over Duke Ralph's head and face. The energy shockwave from the compressed magic bullet knocked the Duke down once again. If it weren't for the iron railings on the platform, the Duke would have been knocked straight off the tower. Something's wrong. Wayne knew he had completely failed this time. Resignedly, he let go of his gun and half-crouched. The Eye of Illusion immediately grabbed the alchemical side and peered towards the Eagle Shed. The Duke possesses a high-level defensive artifact, the Eye of Illusion decisively asserted, then shook its head in disbelief. But Duke Ralph himself isn't a spellcaster. How did he activate the artifact's defensive properties? The astrologer, who had been cradling the crystal ball with his eyes tightly closed, suddenly opened them and hastily warned, "Oh no! They've discovered the Duke is under attack. A high-level spellcaster is hiding among the guards downstairs, using advanced detection techniques to lock onto the surrounding magical fluctuations." Wayne, still unwilling to give up, dismantled the Barrett and gritted his teeth. "Can we find a way to remain hidden in the city? Perhaps we can still find a suitable opportunity to escape." The Eye of Illusion shook its head in denial without hesitation. Without further ado, it and the astrologer grabbed Wayne's arms, one on each side, and weaved him awkwardly between them. They cast a flying spell and sped out of the city. Duke Ralph's guards contain not only a high-level spellcaster, but also likely more than one high-level bloodline warrior. Chapter 370 The Aftermath of Fear. Morik wasn't always at Duke Ralph's side. As the Duke's personal magical advisor, besides assisting him with planning and handling extraordinary matters involving spellcasters, he also shouldered the Duke's personal safety. Duke Ralph himself was no ordinary aristocratic dandy. He lacked the usual aristocratic anxieties of mistresses and illegitimate children, nor did he indulge in the philandering world of women. His only pleasures lay in horses and falconry. Therefore, Morik wasn't particularly wary of the Duke's occasional visits to the barracks or the Eagle Shed. It wasn't until he waited quietly outside the Eagle Shed that a sudden, violent, and unusual surge of magical energy erupted from the tower summit. While ordinary guards or bloodline warriors might be imperceptible, to a newly ascended spellcaster, it was like a thunderclap overhead. Morik didn't have time to call his guards. He quickly chanted a spell and soared to the top of the tower. The high-ranking bloodline warrior, who had just been chatting with him cheerfully, looked downcast and rushed into the Eagle Room at breakneck speed. They both reached the top of the tower almost simultaneously and were stunned by the scene on the platform. The Duke himself lay slumped against the edge of the platform, covered in blood, his life or death unknown. Two of the three falconers lay motionless beside the scaffolding, their mouths and noses soaked with blood. The worst of all was the remaining one, who had suffered some unknown attack, his head and upper body completely blasted into bloody shreds. The scene was horrific. Morik and the bloodline warrior exchanged a glance. The latter immediately threw himself at the Duke's side, using his body as a shield. The former quickly drew out an amplifying device and cast a high-level detection spell to search for the enemy attacking from the shadows. This was no ordinary assassination attempt. No alchemical weapon could cause such a violent surge of magical energy. And within the Eagle Chamber, there were clearly no signs of any spellcaster activity, unless the attacker possessed the dimensional teleportation ability only possessed by legendary spellcasters. 100 meters. 500 meters. Aside from the two apprentice magic servants currently at the tower's base, Morik sensed no unusual magical fluctuations. He tightened his grip on the amplifying device, increasing the intensity of the magic confusion. 1,000 meters. Two faint strings of magical energy suddenly appeared 1,000 meters away, but seemed to vanish as soon as Morik detected them, leaving him with only a vague sense of their location. Southwest. The suspected attacker is fleeing, Morik said in a deep voice, but he had no intention of using his flight spell to pursue them, partly because he feared being lured away, and partly because, without the help of his companions, he had no confidence in victory. Camby, how is the Duke? He is unconscious. The defensive magic weapon he carried with him was shattered. He must have suffered more than one attack. Camby carefully turned the Duke's somewhat thick neck and found that blood was also faintly oozing from his ears. He may have serious internal injuries. We must return to the Duke's mansion immediately and summon Archbishop Fingin to come and treat His Excellency the Duke. Archbishop Fingin, who hurried over, arrived almost at the same time as the guard carriage escorting the Duke back to the mansion. After repeatedly casting 3 healing spells and taking a dose of magic potion, Duke Ralph finally slowly woke up from his coma. Ahem. Damn it, the Duke was supported and half lying on the bed, asking the people guarding the bedroom, what happened? Someone actually dared to attack me in the Eagle House. The captain of the guard, Campy, had a dark face and was speechless for a long time. Instead, Morik took the initiative to step forward and excused him. My lord, the assassin is not lurking in the Eagle House, but attacking you from farther away in the city. The Duke widened his eyes in disbelief. What? What kind of bow and arrow hidden weapon can hit me from the bottom up, on such a high Eagle House tower? He stared at Morris and asked in a deep voice, a long-range attack magic weapon of the spellcaster. Or some kind of alchemical weapon. The magic consultant shook his head. As far as I know, only the Skyfire demon-breaking crossbow developed by the Alchemy Exploration Society can reach a casting distance of 500 meters, but that thing is as big as a four-wheeled carriage. There is no reason to pull it into Fingin City without being discovered. Of course, it is even more impossible to hit the Duke on the tower so silently. The Duke didn't ask further questions, only feeling a dull pain in his chest and a dry throat. He hadn't fainted during the first wave of attacks. A falconer had rushed over to help him up, and then the falconer's head and upper body suddenly exploded in front of him, spraying him with sticky, hot flesh and blood. If that falconer hadn't intervened, he might have. The thought of this made his hair stand on end, and he quickly raised his hand to touch his neck. Archbishop Miro Rivera of Fingin hurried forward and said in a gentle, soothing voice, Your Excellency, It's a blessing that you follow the Archduke's instructions and always wore this protective talisman bestowed upon you by His Holiness the Pope. Otherwise, you would have been unsustainable from this terrible attack." "Indeed," Duke Ralph said, still in shock. "I never imagined the Pope's protective talisman would be so miraculous, capable of warding off this terrifying attack. Have the assassins been apprehended? Who are they and what are their identities?" Kimbrel and Morik exchanged a glance, then said in a deep voice, "They appear to be 2 high-level spellcasters. After being exposed, they immediately used flight to flee the city. We discovered they attacked from an abandoned tower on the inner city wall, and they left a note behind." Duke Ralph's face sank as he took the note from Morik and unfolded it. He shuddered at the scribbled words. "This is a warning, but not the last. A friendly reminder from our northern neighbor. It's not an open assassination by the Federation. It's actually the one I was planning to deal with, the spellcaster lord entrenched in the northern border, Harvey. The other party actually sent 2 high-level spellcasters, and they also carried such a terrible weapon that can silently kill the target from thousands of miles away." Archduke Ralph turned his neck slightly and saw 2 waiters standing in front of the spacious and gorgeous floor-to-ceiling windows, carefully lifting the heavy curtains so that the Duke, who had just woken up, could breathe some fresh air. Draw the curtains. Close the windows," the Duke shouted suddenly, his voice hoarse, as if his throat was pinched and there was a slight tremor. "Camby, help me to the basement of the castle immediately. It's not safe here." "Yes, my lord." The captain of the guard seemed to realize why the Duke was nervous, and hurried forward to help him up, and hurried downstairs surrounded by the crowd. Regardless of the strange and powerful magical weapons the enemy possessed, the castle's basement's thick stone walls and steel doors were far safer than the Duke's bedroom's expansive French windows on 3 sides. As the fury of the inexplicable attack gradually subsided, Duke Ralph found that even within the castle's sturdy and heavily guarded basement, an inexplicable fear still sent a chill down his spine and tightened his heart. Chapter 371 Intelligence Feedback. As Wayne and his 2 companions successfully escaped Fingigan City, the Eye of Illusion immediately sent a message to Harvey using the magical brain device they carried. "Eye of Illusion, Sir Harvey, the deterrent operation against Duke Ralph was completed 3 days ago. I apologize. Since you previously granted us the authority to act freely during the operation, Mr. Wayne attempted to kill Duke Ralph directly during the sniper plan, but unfortunately, he was unsuccessful. Eye of Illusion, we immediately left Fingigan City after the attack and are currently on a merchant ship returning to Sancha Town. According to an informant from the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce, Fingigan City has been completely sealed off, prohibiting free entry and exit. We haven't been able to ascertain the Duke's specific condition, but it's likely only minor injuries. After all, he possesses some strange defensive magical device that activates automatically without the need for magical guidance, astrologer, but almost everyone in Fingigan City knew about the attack on the Duke. No matter if it was in the storehouses, taverns, hotels or on the streets, everyone was discussing it privately and spreading the story in an increasingly outrageous way. Some even claimed to have seen with their own eyes a legendary spellcaster descend on Fingigan City and directly attack and kill Duke Ralph. Eye of Illusion, haha. The content of the warning letter we left before leaving the attack site was also circulated from the tightly sealed Duke's mansion, which caused a sensation in the local aristocratic circle. Many people believe that the Federation wanted to use us to get rid of Grand Duke St. Valen's #1 vassal. After quickly scanning the messages from the 2 forum members, Harvey felt completely relieved. He had anticipated that if Wayne were leading this mission, his ruthless and decisive nature would inevitably lead him to take a risky attempt to kill the Duke directly. He hadn't expected the 2 high-level spellcasters to actually agree with this idea and fully cooperate with him in this risky attempt. He recalled the forum's early days, when the members first united in their vengeance against the church's witch hunters. Mr. Illusion I had seemed unusually active, proactively stepping forward to take the initiative. I never thought this seemingly elegant and gentle high-level mage could actually be such a warmonger. Harvey shook his head with a wry smile. Seeing that he showed no intention of rising from his desk, the attendant quickly brought him a cup of freshly brewed black tea. Harvey took a sip, then exited the forum's one-way chat section and entered a separate encrypted channel independent of the forum. This was the intelligence communication network established specifically for the secret police trained by Arsterlin, codename 091. According to the intelligence currently gathered from Fingigan City, the Duke's vassal nobles and vassals haven't reacted violently, but the Ralph family has urgently recalled their direct family members stationed in the surrounding counties, perhaps fearing a widespread assassination attempt against the family. Codename 088, the Duke's residence has been sealed off for 3 full days. The Archbishop of Fingin responded to the summons the day the Duke was attacked, but he hasn't been seen leaving the residence since. Therefore, I suspect Duke Ralph has been seriously injured. Codename 085, as planned. We've secretly used various channels to portray this as a joint effort by the Union and the Northern Wastes, a warning and punishment for Duke Ralph's excessive taxation and plundering of the people in his fiefdom and surrounding counties. This is an obvious fact, and many people have taken it for granted. The list of secret police who had infiltrated Fingin City to gather intelligence in advance is exactly 3 people, perfectly matching the number of codename members currently sending encrypted messages over the communication channel. Harvey sighed, hoping this deterrent action would temporarily halt Duke Ralph's rampage, buying him some breathing space to quickly recruit and win over the population. Just then, as Dallin gently pushed the door open and entered. My lord, the secret army Duke Ralph sent to Frostflower County suddenly abandoned the mercenaries and civilians they had recruited and captured at noon today, and marched likely towards the Sacred Spine Mountains. Harvey raised an eyebrow in surprise. Oh? They received news of the Duke's attack so quickly. It seemed the deterrent action had been truly effective. Duke Ralph, completely overwhelmed by fear and anger, had abandoned the time-consuming tactics of attrition and planned to directly cross the Sacred Spine Mountains and attack the frontier territory. This was exactly the result Harvey had hoped for. There was nothing more pleasing than a weak opponent offering themselves up to him. By the way, where is Reiner? He didn't disturb my lunch break today for the first time. Normally, he likes to pick this time to come to me to report on his work. As Dallin smiled and said, the wind and snow have stopped in the past few days, and the weather has improved a little. The refugees transferred from Sancher Town are endless, almost filling the entire Grizzly Fort dock. The city hall has sent 3 batches of people to support, but it is still a bit stretched. Reiner couldn't stand their work efficiency, so he went to Grizzly Fort in person. Fortunately, there is no need to worry too much about plagues and infectious diseases in the middle of winter. Otherwise, this batch of refugees transported from the south of St. Valen will not only need to register tedious identity information, but also have to deal with quarantine and epidemic prevention work, which will keep the already short-staffed city hall busy. I've instructed the Ministry of Construction to begin renovating the abandoned refugee settlement outside the city. At least these refugees who've come from afar won't have to suffer in the freezing cold of the northern wilderness, living in leaky, dilapidated shacks. Arturo Lambert set down the thin sheet of paper in his hand, muttering to himself, I see. Senator Prowl, observing his dazed look, asked with some concern, Speaker? Is there something wrong? Since officially embarking on his new research into the soul realm, Arturo, patriarch of the Lambert family and concurrently speaker of the necromancer cult, has rapidly surpassed others in both progress and results. The reason is simple. As a newly transformed alchemical being, Arturo has truly experienced the true power of a congenitally scientific body, needing no food or rest. As long as he maintains a sufficient infusion of mana, he can conduct experiments without sleep. No longer burdened by the frailty of a research-oriented spellcaster. No wonder Sir Harvey believed the soul realm's potential far surpassed traditional fields of flesh and blood transformation in death energy spellcasting. We've indeed been following an outdated research path. Only today did I truly realize what Sir Harvey meant by the wrong path, without the need for ancient, cumbersome taboo rituals and blood sacrifices, nor the daunting risks of attempting lich transformation. Simply extracting the soul intact from the previously frail flesh and blood body and transferring it into customized rune alchemical prosthesis could free the undead spellcaster from its shackles and truly enter the transcendent realm of soul immortality. Arturo, with a thought, raised a metallic mechanical arm and gently waved toward several experimental alchemical beasts stagnant against the laboratory wall. Using the unique soul-linking properties of alchemical life forms, he activated them all and, under his control, resumed the frantic preparations for the experiment. These were specially commissioned by Reiner, a fellow alchemist, for Arturo's relentless work habits. Few normal magic apprentices could serve as his lab assistants. Those young people were still living humans, after all, and couldn't withstand the brutal torture of 007. Arturo was naturally grateful. When this new experimental project makes progress in a few days, I'll ask Sir Harvey to equip me with a set of alchemical tentacles. just like the ones my fellow magician, Sir Reiner, has. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, Pursuit and Request for Assistance. Duke Ralph's elite surprise force deployed in Frostflower County was vulnerable to the Northern Army's sudden attack. To swiftly cross the Divine Spine Mountains, these elite knights and bloodline warriors from Fingigan City launched a surprise attack on Harvey's frontier settlement at the foot of the mountains, abandoning even their horses and siege equipment. Braving the bitter cold and heavy snow, they were immediately ambushed by Northern Army troops lying in wait at the foot of the mountains. The Northern Army's 1st Battalion, led by Vaughn, numbering over 500 soldiers, supported by a special operations unit of 50 bloodline warriors, completely routed the enemy in a single direct engagement. Leaving countless bodies on the vast snowy plains, they fled back towards the Divine Spine Mountains. The subsequent sporadic battles were largely a one-sided pursuit by the bloodline warriors, skilled in rapid-fire combat, accompanied by their exceptionally skilled wolf spider alchemists. Damn it! Aren't these guys supposed to be Duke Ralph's elite knights? Why are they so vulnerable? Duff angrily pulled his feet out of the knee-deep snow and cursed as he reloaded his revolver. The adjutant came forward with a bitter face and said, "Ordinary knights are indeed vulnerable, but those bloodline knights and spellcasters are different. Although they seem to have no tactical training at all, they really gave us a lot of trouble in one-on-one battles." The adjutant's words came from the heart. After all, not long ago, he had just withstood a fireball fired at his chest by a low-level spellcaster, wielding a scorching sword to pierce the opponent, and he himself had survived with a unique magic resistance talent of a bloodline warrior, leaving only a burnt and festering wound on his chest. Vaughn shook off the snowflakes on his body and asked with a cold face, "Were there any other people injured in the encounter just now?" "Two unlucky guys had their arms chopped off, and there was a fool who didn't notice the enemy hiding in the tree, and was stabbed from the shoulder to the abdomen. Fortunately, his bloodline talent can stimulate potential and suppress injuries. He should be able to be saved after being carried to the camp at the foot of the mountain." Vaughn frowned and said, "Although these bloodline knights and low-level spellcasters can't directly resist the volley attack of magic guns, after they fled into the mountains and forests, they posed a considerable threat to our soldiers responsible for searching. It was also a dispersed search and small-scale pursuit encounter. After being forced into a desperate situation, the enemy's bloodline knights and spellcasters broke out with a posture of dying together, causing rare casualties to the Northern Army, which rarely suffered losses in battle. This even included the bloodline warriors of the Special Forces. After a day and night of pursuit, while they successfully forced this small group of enemies into a ravine on the mountainside, effectively cornering them, the Northern Army also lost over 20 ordinary soldiers and 7 or 8 bloodline warriors. Dave said bitterly, "If only the artillery battalion could be brought up the mountain, firing a few powerful rounds into the ravine's cliffs. Ideally, trigger an avalanche and bury them. Unfortunately, the terrain is rugged and the snow is too deep. Even with the alchemy beasts, it would be difficult to get such a heavy artillery cart up." Vaughn glanced up at the sky, helplessly noticing that the snow was getting heavier. "Seal off the ravine exit and arrange for the soldiers to set up camp. We'll resume our encirclement and suppression efforts tomorrow morning." In less than half an hour, darkness fell completely, and several huge bonfires were lit in the camp firmly entrenched at the ravine's mouth. "Why wait until daybreak to encircle and suppress them?" Dave complained to Vaughn, his blackened fingers scraping the last slivers of grease from the can of beef. "Before we set out, you boasted to Commander Pierce that we'd complete the mission in 3 days. Should we charge straight in and die together with them, braving spellcasters' fireballs, ice blades, and those whirling arcane projectiles that could blast a bloody hole through the chest?" Vaughn replied grimly as he added a few more logs to the campfire. Dave was immediately choked, not daring to retort. He knew that quickly destroying this group of enemies would be a matter of charging in and firing a few volleys, but their desperate counterattack would also result in at least a dozen casualties for the Northern Army. In the past, among the refugee tribes of the wasteland, even a single night of heavy snow would have frozen many to death each winter. They had long been accustomed to indifference. But since arriving in the frontier territory, growing up with these brothers in arms, sharing life and death battles, they could not bear to watch them suffer needless casualties. We waited until dawn to await Master Duncan's arrival, Vaughn explained in a low voice after a long silence. Dave was stunned, then hesitantly said, "In the end, we'll have to ask the spellcaster for help." Vaughn certainly didn't want to do that. The Lord had said that a qualified people's army should never rely on the individual strength of transcendence, but rather learn to utilize the technical support provided by such transcendental powers to accomplish combat missions through tactical coordination and unity. If it had been the arrogant Commander Pierce who came in person, he probably wouldn't have cared too much about the casualties and would have issued a completely cold order to quickly eliminate the enemy. But Vaughn didn't consider his actions a sign of weakness. After all, Lord Harvey had also said that every time a combat order was issued, an officer must be responsible for the lives of his soldiers. Such an officer was a qualified commander. Unexpectedly, not long after the call for assistance was sent out, the high-level spellcaster Duncan arrived at midnight with 2 magic apprentices. This Master of Illusion, like his students Mr. Illusion and Ms. Astrolator, shared a common approachable and gentle personality, without any of the superior airs of the transcendent. "I hear you've trapped a group of spellcasters and bloodline knights in the valley ahead," the gray-haired Duncan asked gently. Vaughn nodded awkwardly and briefly explained the current difficulties and predicament. "There are several low and mid-level spellcasters, and the rest are bloodline knights." Vaughn briefly described the terrain of the valley in the snow beneath his feet. "It's a dead end inside, but they rely on the boulders and mountain walls, making it impossible for us to effectively kill them with shooting." "Don't those spellcasters have enough magic power?" "From yesterday until now, whenever the Special Forces soldiers sneak in, they are met with numerous magical attacks." Duncan chuckled at this. "Young man, it seems that although you are loyal to the Lord who is a spellcaster, you really don't understand spellcasters. They should all carry a lot of magic stones on them, which can replenish magic power anytime and anywhere. Moreover, we can also draw magic power from the magic network through meditation. This is different from the magic guns in your hands. When the bullets are exhausted, it becomes a useless iron rod." Chapter 373 Artificial Bombs. Heavy snow fell, and a large number of fully armed Northern Army soldiers gathered halfway up the God's Spine Mountains. Harvey's magical advisor, Duncan, took off his heavy fur coat and asked his magic apprentice to bring up a small wooden box. Vaughn stepped forward respectfully and asked in a low voice, "Master Duncan, are you planning to use offensive magic weapons in conjunction with area casting to deal with the enemies hiding in the valley?" Duncan's gray hair fluttered in the wind. He glanced at the orc officer and teased, "Area casting? You heard the term from His Excellency the Lord, right?" He raised his metal mechanical arm and carefully opened the box at his feet. "You really think highly of me, a disabled old man with a prosthetic limb. The magic veins in my body are severely damaged, and I have long been unable to cast high-level area spells." A huge cannonball with a strange shape was placed steadily in the box at the feet. Wayne and others recognized it at a glance. "Magic cannonball? This? Without a cannon, what are you sending this thing for?" Duncan smiled without saying a word and slowly took a few steps back. The sound of the spell was accompanied by a violent friction between flesh, bones and metal. His body twisted and expanded at an extremely fast speed, and finally transformed into a lion-headed monster that was stronger than a dire bear. A pair of huge metal wings suddenly extended from his hairy ribs, which could be stretched and retracted freely, looking extremely flexible. "Oh my God! A winged lion!" Dave took 2 steps back in shock. "Their legs and wings are gleaming with a metallic sheen. Could they be made of iron?" Duncan's apprentice whispered, explaining, "This is Master's newly refined illusion technique, perfectly complementing the alchemical prosthetics." The Iron Griffin, the Leviathan gasped, a stream of searing white air emanating from its maw. Then, stepping forward, its claws extended to seize the massive magic cannonball. Its wings whipped up a cloud of snow and soared into the air. Its massive, dark form gradually spiraled and climbed above the camp, then turned and flew straight for the valley's mouth. "Master Duncan, are you taking this cannonball to the mouth?" Vaughn was puzzled. But seeing that the reinforcements had already begun to move, he quickly issued orders to the soldiers already on standby. Under cover of night, guided by the moonlight, the group slowly advanced towards the valley. When they reached the mouth of the col, they discovered Duncan, transformed into a griffin, swooping down from the high cliffs into the valley, its claws still clutching the significantly larger magic cannonball. The remaining enemies in the valley had also sensed the attack from above, and several HUD-sized fireballs and arcane missiles whizzed into the sky, but the griffin nimbly dodged them with its deflection. It swooped down at high speed again, its massive wings gleaming metallically in the moonlight. When it was still 50 or 60 meters above the ground, it released its grip, and the large monocannonball flew out, whistling towards the enemies hiding in the rocks in the valley. Boom! Vaughn felt a ringing in his ears, and everything around him seemed to fall silent. Then, a huge, thick column of fire suddenly rose from the valley, shaking the entire mountainside. Many soldiers fell flat on their backs in the snow from the resounding noise. Before Dave could rub his ears, which had been stinging from the shock, he noticed a torrent of rubble and snow pouring down from the cliff above. He shouted a warning, "Stay away from the valley." Avalanche! Everyone scrambled back to the camp, watching helplessly as the falling rocks and snow quickly filled up the entire valley, as if it had never existed. The soldiers froze for a moment, then erupted in loud cheers, marveling at the immense power of this new weapon. This is far more powerful than the magic artillery shells," Vaughn muttered to himself. "It's like divine punishment from the gods." Duncan, who had already landed and transformed back into human form, approached and said with a smile, "How is it?" "The power of the magic alchemical bomb is much stronger than that area of effect attack spell you mentioned, isn't it?" In the hall of Harvey's lord's castle, another grand celebration banquet was held. This was primarily to commend Wayne and his two companions for their mission to deter the enemy in Fingagan City, and also to commend the Northern Army for their successful interception of a large enemy force in the Divine Spine Mountains the day before. Besides Wayne, the Eye of Illusion, and the astrologer, all the high-ranking officers of the Northern Army were in attendance. To liven up the atmosphere, Harvey also brought along Chief Administrative Officer Reiner, Chief Advisor Asdelin, and Dean of the Academy Arturo. The three alchemists clearly lacked the desire or ability to enjoy fine food and fine wine, but they weren't embarrassed. They gathered together and happily chatted about their research on alchemical creations. Also forcibly dragged to the banquet by Harvey were Chris and Benoit, who had long been confined to the alchemy laboratory. They couldn't escape the clamor. After witnessing the power of the laboratory's new magic energy bomb, the Northern Army officers, led by Pierce, surrounded the two alchemists and began repeatedly torturing them under the guise of forcing them to drink. He sought to extract from them the final test results of the new weapon, as well as information on when it would enter mass production and be deployed to the military. This was also Harvey's first attempt to replicate the banquet format of his previous life in the present world. Instead of the traditional long wooden table separating the guests from the host, each seated opposite the other, all food was meticulously cut and presented on large plates. Meats, vegetables, and fruits were individually divided, each accompanied by a rich selection of sauces, allowing everyone to choose according to their preferences. Akin to a buffet, this novel banquet format was unprecedented, not only for the spellcasters from the southern border, but even for the local officials who had lived with Harvey in the wasteland for years. The northern officers, crouched around the long, self-service table, their plates clutched, their mouths drooling with delight. Using a magical energy-gathering array to heat an indoor botanical garden, allowing everyday fruits, vegetables, and flowers to flourish even in the depths of winter. "I never imagined magic could have such a unique purpose." Duncan, holding a glass of iced vodka, approached Harvey and struck up a conversation. Harvey smiled and clinked glasses with him, whispering, "In the past, we've limited magic's use to detached, advanced research. Forgetting its inherent universal value. Since spellcasters all ascend to transcendental status from mortal bodies, why can't a magic that allows them to ascend also benefit ordinary people?" Duncan paused for a moment before slowly nodding, lost in thought as he gazed at the full glass in his hand. Seeing this, Arturo, the Dean of the Academy of Magical Sciences, took the opportunity to move closer to Harvey and whispered, "Sir, the three experimental teams at the Academy are all making very encouraging progress in their experiments on the Soul Transfer Project." Harvey nodded with satisfaction. "As for equipment and materials, if you have any needs, just ask the City Hall directly. They have allocated sufficient research budget for the Academy." "Huh? Arturo was obviously not here to ask for funds. "What I mean is, Your Excellency, the Academy now has quite a few mid to high-level colleagues, who would like to apply to you, to voluntarily transform into alchemical life forms." Chapter 374 Beast Titan Late Winter. Don't shake your hand when holding the gun, keep the butt firmly against your shoulder, or the impact of the magic energy rounds will throw you off. The reload is too slow. By the time you've finished loading, the enemy will be right in front of you and ready to chop your head off. Don't look left or right. Keep your sights on the crosshairs, the muzzle, and the target, all in a straight line. In the outpost camp, Wayne, fresh off leave, was sternly supervising the new recruits as they completed their daily training for their first frontline rotation. Benny, who had been in the army for less than 3 months, was one of them. He had originally been a simple porter at the docks in Perch Town, a suburb of Jinhu City. Since the outbreak of the plague, he'd been swept north along with a flood of refugees. Luckily, he finally made it to Jackdaw Town, where he received medical treatment and shelter from the Lord. Aside from the significantly colder climate, the Pioneer Territory couldn't have been more satisfying to Benny. Here, at least, he didn't have to worry about starving due to lack of work, or the constant fear of not having enough to eat or not having enough. His only regret was that he wasn't a student. After 3 months of literacy training, Benny struggled mightily and took 4 makeup exams before barely passing. He even suspected his last chance pass was simply out of the teacher's mercy. Reality was harsh. With his barely passing education, he couldn't secure a well-paid job contract. However, believing that as long as he had hands and feet, he wouldn't starve, Benny enthusiastically applied to join the newly formed Garrison Corps. While the salary for agricultural soldiers wasn't as high as regular soldiers, the advantage was that they provided food and lodging, and the food was said to be quite good. In Benny's own words, it was a much better prospect than a lifetime of carrying heavy bags at the docks. Unexpectedly, not long after completing his induction training, he was inexplicably singled out by 2 Northern Army Battalion commanders during a surprise inspection by their commander. He was immediately transferred to the Northern Army without further explanation. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Long arms and legs, and a muscular build. It's such a waste to be stuck farming in the garrison. Benny still remembers the fierce-looking officers' expressions as if they were selecting breeding cattle and horses when he was first spotted. He was then taken directly to the outpost fortress in the Ice Valley and became a regular army recruit. According to Northern Army custom, after completing induction training, new recruits are sent directly to the front lines of the battle against the fell orcs, with veterans assigned to serve as instructors. Unfortunately for Benny, he was assigned to Captain Wayne's direct squad, undergoing even more brutal and rigorous training than the other recruits. Benny. What are you daydreaming about? Benny was caught in the act of distraction. Practice the squatting shooting action 50 more times. The new recruit standing behind him immediately gritted his teeth and whispered, "Damn Benny, he made us practice more again." Wayne quickly walked to Benny's team and stopped, saying with a cold face, "Stop whispering to me, and you. Practice the quick reloading action 50 times. A young recruit finally couldn't help it and muttered, "Sir, the weather is too cold. My fingers are so stiff that I can't move them." "How long do we have to practice?" Wayne grinned. "Practice until you can complete a quick reloading within 5 seconds with your eyes closed." Immediately, bursts of gasps were heard in the team. Finally, the extra training session ended. The veterans were free to move around and chat with each other, but Benny and his group of new recruits were left sitting cross-legged on the open ground, gritting their teeth and using their frozen fingers to remove the bullets they had once loaded into the magazines one by one. Someone suddenly muttered, "I wonder if tonight's dinner will be fried pork chops and salmon chowder like yesterday." Everyone around him gulped. Benny also secretly swallowed, a look of longing on his face. Back home, he had been conscripted by his lord and served as a baggage carrier in the army, but it was always unpaid labor for the nobles and he had to provide his own rations. But being a soldier in this frontier territory in the northern wilderness was completely different. While the officers and veterans were often fierce and aggressive, and he occasionally received a beating for his foolish behavior, the food was truly excellent. Toasted wheat cakes and bacon were standard provisions, and during training exercises or sentry rotations, additional rations were provided, sometimes including a half-pound of fried pork chops or a bowl of hot salmon chowder. Although rations were military, soldiers were allowed to eat as much as they could, with no unwarranted deductions or cuts. Another moment of distraction immediately drew a merciless rap on the head from the waiting veteran. "Benny, is that magazine stuck in your hand? You can't remove it for ages. My 80-year-old grandfather is more agile than you." The veteran rubbed his hands together and threatened with a wink. "Don't delay dinner, or I'll have the cook cancel your extra meal tonight." The new recruits quickly lowered their heads and unloaded their ammunition, unwilling to be targeted and have their extra meal canceled. Suddenly, a sharp whistle blared from the fortress's watchtower. Enemy attack? The snow had stopped for days, and the evil orcs hadn't even started migrating back yet. "Everyone, get ready," Wayne shouted. New recruits, led by their respective instructors, will ascend the fortress walls in order and be ready to engage. The veteran soldier standing beside Benny swiftly swung his magic rifle onto his back and urged calmly, "Have you read me? Grab your rifles, and don't forget your magazines and bullets. Follow me closely as you've trained. Our combat position is on the northwest wall. Let's go." After arriving at their designated combat positions as ordered by their superiors, the veterans skillfully completed a final pre-battle weapon check. Then, they rested their rifles on the parapets and instructed the new recruits following behind to reload their magazines. Benny, experiencing this kind of situation for the first time, was a little nervous, but a glance up at the relaxed expressions of the veteran instructors quickly soothed his surging fear. If only I could hold a magic gun, stand on the wall and unleash a few devastating rounds on those damned, savage, and brutal aliens. A dark shadow loomed in the dense forest on the opposite bank, and among it seemed to be several extremely large targets. HMPH. They've gathered a few more stitched corpse puppets and given them to us for free. The veteran tucked the gun under his armpit and reached into his jacket pocket to pull out a cigarette. Just as he was about to light it, he suddenly narrowed his eyes. Wait? That's not a stitched corpse puppet. What is it? The huge black shadow was clearly several times faster than the corpse puppet. It quickly burst out of the dense forest and plunged into the frozen glacial river with a loud bang. The thick river ice seemed unable to bear its weight and broke apart, allowing the terrifying monster to sink into the river with a thud. Battalion Commander Wayne, evidently more experienced, furrowed his brow and shouted in a deep voice, "It's a demonic mounted beast. And it's several sizes larger than ordinary mounted beasts. It must be an untamed wild beast." He had stumbled upon these terrifying beasts while escorting Lords Egno and Chris on an expedition deep into the icy plains. It took a dozen bloodline warriors, coupled with continuous bursts of magic musket fire, to barely bring them down. The magic attacks spewed from their mouths could cause terrible casualties among ordinary soldiers if they weren't careful. But why were they here? Chapter 375 Flesh and Blood. The massive demonic beast, having shattered the ice and sunk into the river, struggled desperately, stirring the once calm surface into turmoil. After a long while, it stumbled back onto the riverbank, revealing its true form to the soldiers atop the outpost. Compared to the common camel-sized demonic beasts ridden by the demonic soldiers, this creature's diet was unfathomable, its massive head the size of a war vehicle. Its two fangs, bearing from its mouth, were thicker than a human thigh. Its limbs, like the weight-bearing stone pillars of a house, left deep craters in the ground with each stride, sending splattering snow and mist flying. Standing there on the riverbank, it appeared to be nearly halfway up the outpost's walls, at least 7 or 8 meters high. If it were to crash directly into the wall, it was doubtful whether the concrete and steel fortress would withstand it. Oh my God! What kind of monster is this? Many of the newly enlisted soldiers, having never fought demons before, naturally failed to recognize the enlarged beast and cried out in shock. This must be the monster the local wastelanders often talk about, the one that lives deep in the icy plains. Look! There are more in the dense forest across the river. There's more than just this one. Wayne swallowed, his throat dry. He also saw the giant beasts gradually appearing in the woods across the river, about 2 or 3 more. Shut up. Keep ready for battle. Undoubtedly, even the rapid-fire magic lances would be of limited use against such a massive monster. Magical creatures share the same terrifying gift as bloodline warriors like them, innate magic resistance. If it were just an ordinary demon beast tamed by the demons, it would be fine. After all, their small size makes them unable to fully withstand the penetrating damage of magic lances. A hit to the head or vital internal organs would be instantly fatal. But the hell-sized creature before him was different. The thick, hard bone armor covering its head and chest alone looked like it was impossible for magic bullets to penetrate, unless they could repeatedly and accurately strike the same vital spot. Wayne instinctively turned his head, looking towards the city's defense guns. He saw 2 massive, metallic gleaming barrels slowly begin to rotate. The artillerymen, responsible for adjusting the direction and angle of fire, were frantically turning the cannons' capstans, aiming their muzzles at the behemoth slowly advancing toward the fortress. A blinding flash of fire flashed, followed by a deafening roar that seemed to explode directly into the soldiers' heads. Many of those closest to the cannons froze for a second before covering their ears with expressions of pain, but it was too late. Wayne ignored the ringing in his ears and immediately looked toward the riverbank, his heart sinking. The shell landed a full dozen meters away from the first monster to emerge. The violent explosion in the snow had no impact on its target, merely startling it slightly and causing it to accelerate towards the fortress. The behemoth wasn't heading directly for the city defense cannons. The defensive trenches on the riverbank and slopes, originally built to keep out the fell orcs, now became obstacles, forcing the behemoth to sway erratically along the riverbank and slopes to avoid the obstacles. The city defense cannons constantly tried to adjust their muzzle direction and firing angle, unable to estimate the proper lead time. After all, the previous missed shell was a lesson learned. Furthermore, the standard shrapnel shells had not yet been mass-produced, and the outposts had only received a few dozen for practical training. But if it were allowed to get any closer, it would create an impenetrable blind spot with the city's defenses. After all, cannons mounted directly on the wall couldn't fire downward at a slight angle. If the beast were to get close enough to save the fortress and the ordinary soldiers within, Wayne and his bloodline warriors would likely have to personally fight to the death. A second shell erupted with a deafening roar, this time with far greater precision. It exploded less than 3 meters from the monster's forelimbs, causing the massive creature to stumble and fall to its knees. Perhaps due to its immense size and weight, the beast struggled for a long time after falling, unable to regain its feet. This gave the artillery crew a keen opportunity to fire. The target at this point was no different from a fixed target. Then, the third cannonball blast. A few breaths later, the fourth boom followed. How, so fast? Wayne couldn't help but turn his head to look at the two nearby city defense cannons. Smoke still billowed from their muzzles, and the rich, pungent aroma of dragon flame powder permeated the entire wall. Each cannon had a crew of 4, working methodically behind the massive barrels, mechanically repeating the routine of opening the lower magazine, inserting shells, unscrewing the safety, and firing. Fortunately, the third and fourth shots finally hit the struggling beast, unable to rise. The shells were fired so quickly that Wayne didn't even see how they struck the monster. He only saw a huge cloud of blood erupt from its side, shattered bone armor and flesh splattering like a fountain, spraying into the snow several meters away. The beast's body shuddered violently, its swollen belly instantly deflated. The solid bone armor on its skin cracked like fragile ice crystals, and more blood, along with its yellow and white viscera, gushed out from the holes. The dying beast seemed to let out a final, unwilling howl. As it opened its bloody maw, it spewed out a pool of viscera before collapsing flat on the ground, lifeless. Wayne and the others then realized that the 2 subsequent shells had struck at different locations. The third had torn a large hole in the beast's solid breastplate, while the fourth had done the damage to its side. The only certainty was that both of these terrifying bombardments had successfully penetrated the beast's body, causing fatal internal explosions and instantly killing the behemoth from the depths of the icy plains. With the success of the first behemoth as a guide, the 2 or 3 that followed across the river would likely be spared from such intense fire. While their accuracy was still somewhat questionable, the city defense artillery's rapid and frequent firing allowed them to be utterly destroyed on the riverbank after a continuous barrage of more than a dozen shells. As for the smaller groups of monsters that seemed to have accompanied the behemoth, dealing with them was even simpler. A few volleys of mono-rifle fire quickly dispatched them. The soldiers atop the fortress walls could no longer contain their excitement, venting the previous fear and worry in cheers and roars. For a moment, cheers erupted from the walls and throughout the camp. Even louder than the artillery barrage. Ah! We've successfully destroyed these giants. Long live the Lord! Long live the Northern Army! Long live the artillery battalion! End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.